Tonight, we're exploring the darkest secrets of every Ultra Beast and the interdimensional legendaries nobody understands. This is a fascinating topic, but I'll keep my narration calm to ensure you can still drift off to sleep. Thank you to those of you who've been joining us consistently. If you're falling asleep with us tonight, let me know in the comments how many nights in a row you've been here. And if this is your first night, just comment night 1. Now back to the video. Imagine, if you will, a tear in the very fabric of the reality you know. A jagged, glowing rift opening in the sky above a tropical paradise, leading the light of 1,000 distant stars into our atmosphere. From these holes in space-time emerge things that do not belong. They are not animals, they are not spirits, and according to the leading researchers of the Alola region, they are technically not even Pokémon. They are the Ultra Beasts. For decades, the world of Pokémon has been defined by a certain order. There is a balance between humans and the natural world, a shared language of battle and companionship, but the Ultra Beasts represent the ultimate violation of that order. They are the great other, entities born in dimensions so alien, so hostile, and so fundamentally different from our own that their mere presence in our world is a catastrophic event. When we look at a creature like Nihilego or Buzzwole, we aren't just looking at a powerful opponent. We are looking at a biological error. These are beings that evolved in pockets of the multiverse, where the laws of physics, the scarcity of energy, and the very concept of survival took on twisted, unrecognizable forms. In their homeworlds, they are simply predators, or perhaps even prey. But when they are dragged through an Ultra Wormhole and dumped into the lush, fragile ecosystem of Alola, they become living weapons of mass destruction. They are invasive species on a cosmic scale. The tragedy of the Ultra Beasts is not just found in the chaos they sow, but in the human wreckage they leave behind. Think of the Ether Foundation, an organization founded on the noble goal of healing hurt Pokémon, which slowly spiraled into a cult of obsession. Think of President Lucamine, a woman whose mind was literally unraveled by the neurotoxins of a parasitic entity she mistook for a beautiful mystery. Think of Moan, a brilliant scientist who vanished into a hole in the air, leaving his family to rot in the shadow of his absence. These are the stakes of the ultra space phenomenon. It is a story of how the pursuit of the unknown can lead to the total erasure of the self. But why are they here? Why does a creature like Circuitry feel the need to plug itself into our power plants and drain them dry until the lights of an entire city go dark? Why does Guzzlord possess an appetite that can swallow mountains, yet leaves no waste behind? There is a theory, whispered in the darker corners of the researcher community, that these 11 entities are more than just random aliens. Some believe they are physical manifestations of the fundamental flaws of the soul. The 7 deadly sins rendered in extraterrestrial flesh and wire. Whether that is true or simply a human attempt to make sense of the senseless, the reality is far more terrifying. We have spent years documenting the legendary birds of Kanto, the ancient giants of Hoenn, and the creators of time and space in Sinnoh. We feel we understand them because they are part of our world's history. But the Ultra Beasts have no history here. They have no myths carved into our temple walls. They are the intruders. They are the things that go bump in the night, when the night itself is a doorway to another world. Tonight, we are going to peel back the veil. We are going to look at the biology of the impossible, the secret projects like the Beast Killer Initiative that led to the creation of artificial life just to stand a chance against them, and the heartbreaking stories of the people who looked into the wormhole and found that the wormhole was looking back. We will examine the terrifying parasitic bond of the symbiont, the overwhelming physical dominance of the absorption and beauty beasts, and the electrical gluttony of the lightning tree. We will delve into the classified files of the International Police and the hidden journals of the Aether Paradise. We are searching for the truth behind the beast boost, that surge of adrenaline that makes these creatures more dangerous the longer they fight. This is not just a study of monsters. It is a journey into the deep, dark reaches of ultraspace, a place where the sun never rises and the stars are always watching. Close your eyes, settle into the quiet, and let the sounds of the multiverse wash over you. We are going through the wormhole now. The Alolan sky has always been beautiful, but it's far more fragile than anyone ever realized. In the space between stars and dreams, there are cracks. Places where the fabric of reality grows thin, and when those cracks tear open, something else pours through, something that doesn't belong. This is the terrifying reality of ultraspace. A dimension so alien that even the laws of physics seem to bend and warp when its creatures arrive. And yet, on one ordinary day in Alola, the sky didn't just crack, it screamed. The first sign was never a flash of light. It was a change in the air, a pressure drop that made your ears ache, a stillness that felt wrong. Birds stopped singing, the ocean seemed to hold its breath, and then a shimmer, like heat haze, began to ripple just above the waves. It didn't burn or explode, it simply opened. A wormhole perfectly circular, with edges that rippled like oil on water. Through it, you could see colours that didn't exist in our spectrum, shapes that moved in ways that hurt to follow. And then the first Ultra Beast stepped through, not a Pokémon, not a legend, something else entirely. To understand why Ultra Beasts aren't considered Pokémon, you have to look at how we define life itself. Biologically, every known Pokémon species shares a common ancestry, a genetic lineage that can be traced back through fossil records and evolutionary trees. They have predictable cell structures, reproduce in known ways, and their energy. Their aura resonates with the world's natural frequencies. Ultra Beasts break every single one of those rules. Their cells are built from compounds that don't exist naturally on Earth. Their bodies radiate an energy that interferes with our instruments, causing static, glitches, and sometimes complete system failure. And legally, the International Police has a strict definition. A Pokémon must be catchable with standard Pokeballs, must register on their tracking networks, and must not trigger dimensional collapse alarms. Ultra Beasts fail on all counts. They are extra-dimensional entities, classified as Ultra Beasts, precisely because they are not Pokémon. The word Pokémon implies a connection to this world. They have none. The haunting atmospheric shift when a wormhole opens is something that stays with witnesses forever. Those who were on Melemele Island when Buzzwole first emerged describe a sound like glass breaking under deep water. The sky turned the colour of bruised fruit, and the air smelled of ozone and something metallic, like blood, but not quite. Tapu Koko, the guardian deity, appeared almost immediately, its body crackling with lightning. But even a legendary Pokémon seemed hesitant. It wasn't afraid of a rival. It was afraid of the unknown. The Ultra Beast didn't attack at first. It simply stood there, flexing its massive arms, testing the gravity, the air pressure, the very weight of existence on Earth. Every movement sent ripples through the atmosphere, as if the world itself was struggling to accept this intruder. Over the following days, more wormholes tore open across Alola. Nihilego emerged near Ether Paradise, its jelly-like body pulsing with an eerie luminescence. It didn't move like a living creature. It drifted, as if underwater, with a grace that was deeply unsettling. And it didn't attack, not directly. Instead, it found a host. This is the core terror of Ultra Beasts. They don't operate by our rules of predation or survival. They simply exist in a way that is incompatible with our reality. Nihilego's presence alone began to warp human minds, whispering suggestions that weren't words. Those who spent too long near it became obsessive, irrational, as if their deepest desires were being amplified and twisted. The fragility of the Alolan sky became a daily reality. People stopped looking up. The once clear horizon now held constant ripples, portals that would open and close without warning. The guardian deities fought back. Tapu Bulu, Tapu Lele, Tapu Fini, and Tapu Koko clashed with these invaders on multiple occasions. But even their legendary power seemed to barely hold the line. The soil itself changed where Ultra Beasts walked. Plants withered or grew into alien shapes. Water turned viscous and strange. It wasn't an invasion of violence. It was an invasion of incompatibility. And at the center of it all stood a woman who had looked too long into the abyss. Luzamine, president of the Ether Foundation, had become obsessed with Ultra Beasts. She believed they held the key to something greater. Evolution, transcendence, escape from a flawed world. But the truth was far darker. Her obsession wasn't entirely her own. Nihilego had already begun to take root inside her mind, slowly replacing her desires with its own. She captured a small, fragile creature named Nebi, what we now know as Cosmog, and used its powers to tear open the dimensional barriers permanently. She didn't see the terror she unleashed. She saw beauty, In the aftermath, Alola became a battlefield. The international police launched Operation Beast Ball, deploying specialized capsules that could contain these entities. But even that technology was a desperate stopgap, and deep within Ether Paradise, a secret project was born. A weapon designed specifically to kill Ultra Beasts. They called it the Beast Killer. It would become Silverly. But before that, there was another name, a name that started it all. A researcher named Mon, who vanished into an Ultra Wormhole. Long before anyone understood what they were dealing with, his disappearance changed everything. It set the stage for a tragedy that would unravel the Ether Foundation from within. That story, the Mon incident, is where the true horror of Ultra Space begins. What happens when someone steps through the threshold and doesn't come back? What happens when the void starts to remember you? That is a question we'll explore in the next chapter. The previous chapter explored the terrifying reality of Ultra Space and the fragility of the Alolan sky, and why Ultra Beasts are classified as not Pokémon. But to truly understand the danger these creatures represent, we have to look at the moment Ultra Space reached out and took a human life, and not just any human. A man whose work was meant to protect the world from the unknown. That man was Mon. Mon was the lead researcher of the Ether Foundation, a scientific organization dedicated to caring for Pokémon and studying the strange phenomena occurring across Alola. He was brilliant, driven, and deeply in love with his family, his wife Lusamine, and their 2 children, Lily and Gladion. But scientific ambition has a way of consuming even the most careful minds. The Ether Foundation was born out of a desire to understand the mysterious tears in reality that occasionally appeared over the Alola region. What would later be called Ultra Wormholes. Mon was the first to seriously study them, to theorize that they led to other dimensions. He built a research facility on an artificial island, Ether Paradise, with a state-of-the-art laboratory and an observatory designed to track wormhole activity. And it was there, on an otherwise ordinary day, that everything went wrong. Mon and his team had detected an unusual energy signature coming from the deepest part of the island's terminal cave. They believed it was a new type of wormhole, one that did not tear open violently, but instead manifested as a pure white hole, a gentle, all-consuming light. Mon, being the lead researcher, insisted on approaching it first. He wanted to collect data, to understand the phenomenon firsthand. But the white hole was not a doorway, it was a maw. The tragic disappearance of the Ether Foundation's lead researcher happened in an instant. One moment, Mon was standing before the glowing aperture, his instruments recording the strange harmonics of Ultra Space. The next, the light expanded, and he was gone, swallowed whole by a dimension that had no intention of giving him back. No scream, no struggle, just silence. The team scrambled to find him, but the white hole sealed itself as quickly as it had appeared, leaving nothing behind but a lingering sense of wrongness. That single scientific accident shattered the Lusamine family forever. Lusamine, once a warm and loving mother, was consumed by grief and then by obsession. She could not accept that Mon was simply lost. She poured every resource of the Ether Foundation into finding him, into opening the wormholes again, into doing whatever it took to bring him home. But over time, her love twisted into something darker. She became cold, dismissive of her children, obsessed with the idea that Ultra Beasts were the key to reuniting with her husband. She blamed herself, she blamed the world, and eventually she blamed her own family for holding her back. Lily and Gladion grew up in the shadow of that tragedy. Gladion became rebellious, fleeing Ether Paradise to join Team Skull, carrying a secret hatred for the creatures that took his father. Lily tried to be the perfect daughter, but Lusamine's detachment and cruel experiments with the Pokémon they captured drove her away. The family was shattered not by death, but by a disappearance that offered no closure. And still, the lingering mystery of the white hole that claimed a human life remains unsolved. What was that aperture? Why did it appear in the terminal cave? Some researchers believe it was a naturally occurring ultra wormhole of a type never seen before. One that does not tear but absorbs, pulling matter into a void where time and space are meaningless. Others whisper that it was not a wormhole at all, but the feeding appendage of a living creature, a creature from ultra space that reached across dimensions to take what it wanted. No trace of Mon was ever found. No signal, no debris, no body. He simply vanished, leaving behind a grieving wife turned fanatic, 2 children scarred by loss, and a foundation that would soon become a weapon against the very beings Mon had wanted to study. The first Ultra Beast to make contact with humanity would not be a warrior or a beast of lightning. It would be a phantom of glass, a parasite that mimics the shape of its victims, and it would use that mimicry to find its way back into our world. But that creature, the one that first emerged from that white hole, would become known as U1, the glass parasite, and it had only just begun to feed. The Mon incident left an imprint on the Aether Foundation that no amount of scientific progress could erase. One moment, a brilliant researcher stepped through a wormhole in pursuit of discovery. The next, he was gone, swallowed by a dimension that had no name, and in his absence, a void opened in the heart of his family, a void that would soon be filled by something far more insidious, something that wore beauty like a mask. That something was the first Ultra Beast ever documented, the one designated UB1 symbiont. Later, it would be given a name that sounded almost poetic, Nihilego. The name itself evokes emptiness, a void, a hollow vessel, and that is exactly what it is. But on the surface, it appears as something else entirely. It looks like a jellyfish, translucent and elegant, drifting through the air as though gravity were merely a suggestion. Its body is a shimmering bell, pale and iridescent, catching light in ways that make it seem almost ethereal. It moves with a fluid grace that is hypnotic to watch, a slow, pulsing dance that draws the eye and refuses to let go. Any casual observer would call it beautiful. But beauty in the natural world is often a deception, a lure designed to conceal something far more terrifying. In the case of Nihilego, that deception is biological. Its outward form hides a structure that is anything but soft. Beneath that glass-like bell extends a proboscis, a long, slender appendage that is harder than diamond. Not metaphorically harder, but literally. Diamond is the hardest natural material known to science. Yet Nihilego's proboscis surpasses it. It can pierce through bone, through metal, through almost any barrier that stands between it and its target. And its target is always living tissue. When Nihilego strikes, it does so with surgical precision. The proboscis plunges deep into the host, often into the skull or spinal column. And then the real horror begins. It releases a neurotoxin, a chemical cocktail that does not simply kill or paralyze. Instead, it rewires. The toxin works directly on the brain, hijacking the host's nervous system, altering perception, emotion, and behavior. The victim remains conscious, aware that their will is no longer their own. They become a puppet, and Nihilego becomes the puppeteer. This is not possession in the supernatural sense. It is a cold, biological manipulation, a parasitic control so complete that the host may even believe their new desires are their own. This is why Nihilego targets the human mind rather than the body. The body is merely a vessel, a vehicle for survival, but the mind is the command center. By taking control of the mind, Nihilego gains access to everything the host knows, everything they feel, everything they can do. It does not need to consume flesh when it can consume a life. The neurotoxin transforms the host into a willing slave, someone who will protect the parasite, feed it, even seek out other potential hosts. In the case of Lucamine, the Aether Foundation president, the effect was catastrophic. She became obsessed with Ultra Beasts, abandoning her children, her responsibilities, her very humanity. She believed she was pursuing a noble goal, but she was merely following the whispers of a creature that had already taken root inside her. And here is the most unsettling part of Nihilego's biology. It does not need to stay attached to its host. Once the neurotoxin is injected, the parasite can detach and drift away, leaving the victim to carry out its will from a distance. The venom acts as a permanent leash, a chain made of chemistry. Even after Nihilego is physically removed, the psychological effects can linger. The host may never fully recover, haunted by thoughts that were never truly theirs. So when you look at Nihilego, drifting like a piece of broken glass through the air, remember what lies beneath that beauty. A diamond-hard needle, a venom that steals the soul, and a hunger that doesn't consume flesh, but identity. It is a creature designed not to destroy the body, but to erase the person inside it. And that makes it one of the most terrifying beings ever to emerge from ultra space. But Nihilego is not alone. There is a reason it is called the symbiont. It seeks a partner, a host, a living throne from which to rule the waking world. And the one who fell under its spell, Lusamine, was only the beginning. What happens when the puppet master's venom spreads beyond a single mind? That is a story that leads deeper into the darkness, to a place where control becomes corruption, and where a mother's love turns into something far more monstrous. That story is waiting for us in the next chapter, a chapter about the true nature of the puppet master's venom. The previous chapter left us staring into the glass-like body of Nihilego, that elegant jellyfish from another dimension. We discussed its terrifying biology, the proboscis harder than diamond, and the neurotoxic venom that it injects into its victims. But we stopped short of the true horror. The venom is not merely a paralytic or a poison. It is a puppet master's tool, a chemical key that unlocks the darkest chambers of the mind. And no victim demonstrates this more completely than Lusamine, the president of the Ether Foundation. To understand the parasitic relationship between Nihilego and Lusamine, you must first understand the loneliness that preceded it. Her husband, Moan, had vanished into an Ultra Wormhole while studying the very creature that would later claim her. Her children, Gladion and Lily, were emotionally distant, caught in the wake of her growing obsession with Ultra Beasts. The Foundation itself became her fortress, and within that fortress, she filled the void with research, with control, with a desperate need to reach across dimensions. Nihilego did not create this hunger, it simply found it. When the parasite attached itself to Lusamine, it did not forcibly override her will. Instead, it whispered. The venom seeped into her neural pathways, amplifying every existing desire into something vast and monstrous. Her love for her children twisted into a cold indifference. Her passion for discovery burned into a mania that saw ultra beasts as beautiful, pure, worthy of worship. The venom made her see the alien as the ideal, and the human as flawed, weak, disposable. She began to believe that merging with Nihilego was not a violation but an ascension. The physical transformation happened slowly at first, a glimmer in her eyes that reflected the jellyfish's bioluminescence, a voice that began to echo with a hollow resonance. Then the changes became undeniable. Her skin took on a translucent quality, like glass being slowly blown into a new shape. Her hair began to float as if underwater. The venom was rewriting her biology, reshaping her into a vessel suitable for Nihilego's own form. She was becoming a hybrid, a creature that belonged neither to Alola nor to ultraspace, but to the space between. The moment of complete transformation came on the altar of Pony Island, when she opened the Ultra Wormhole and stepped through. There, in the distorted light of ultraspace, her body dissolved and reformed. She became a towering, pale monstrosity, a fused entity with Nihilego's tentacles and her own face stretched into a mask of ecstasy. The mother who had once tucked her children into bed was now a dimensional monster. Her human consciousness drowned in the venom's symphony of obsession. She no longer saw her son Gladion as her son. She saw him as an obstacle to be eliminated. This is the true horror of the puppet master's venom. It does not attack the mind. It befriends it. It takes the seeds of passion, of grief, of ambition, and feeds them until they grow into a forest that blocks out all other light. Lusamine's downfall was not caused by an external enemy. It was caused by the amplification of her own heart. Nihilego simply held the mirror, and the venom made her unable to look away. What happens when a creature from a world without weakness meets a human who has spent a lifetime pretending to be strong? The parasite finds the crack and pours itself in. And when the transformation is complete, there is no longer a mother, a scientist, a president. There is only a host, a puppet, a beautiful glass prison for a soul that once belonged to Alola. But Nihilego is not the only ultra beast that reshapes the world around it. There is another, one that emerged from a jungle where survival is the only law, and where every creature must prove its strength by flexing until the air itself trembles. That story, the story of the beast that measures worth by the density of its muscle, is waiting just ahead. We left off in the aftermath of the Ether Paradise incident, where Lusamine's mind had been hollowed out and rebuilt by the neurotoxic venom of Nihilego. Her desires, once noble, had been twisted into something unrecognizable, a hunger for power that couldn't be satisfied, a need to break through to ultraspace at any cost. That parasitic loss of control the quiet horror of a person being rewritten from within, is a fitting prelude to what we're about to discuss. Because while Nihilego operated through psychological manipulation, the second Ultra Beast discovered in Alola operated with something far more primitive, pure, unadulterated force. UB2 absorption, the codename given by the International Police, was Buzzwole. And it came from a dimension called the Ultra Jungle. This is not a playful name. The Ultra Jungle was a place where survival depended entirely on strength, where the weak were simply metabolized into fuel for the strong. There were no alliances, no mercy, no second chances. Every creature there, if you could even call them creatures, lived under a single law: grow stronger or become someone else's energy. Buzzwole evolved in that crucible, and it brought that philosophy with it to Earth. To understand Buzzwole, you have to understand its body. It stands over 7 feet tall, covered in a hard black exoskeleton with vivid red stripes that pulse with a faint internal glow. Its arms are disproportionately massive, covered in spikes and bristling with muscle that seems to inflate and deflate continuously. But the most unsettling feature is its head, or rather, what protrudes from it. A long needle-like snout, almost like a mosquito's proboscis, but thicker, tougher and designed for a very specific purpose. That snout is not a mouth. It is an organ of absorption. When Buzzwole identifies a target, it doesn't attack with its fists first, not always. It drives that proboscis into the victim with incredible speed and force, and then it begins to drink. Not blood exactly, but something deeper: energy, the raw life force that flows through all living things. Witnesses have described seeing a victim's body shrink, wither, and become pale and brittle as Buzzwole drains everything that makes them alive. The process is swift, and the result is horrifying. The victim is left as a dry husk, a shell of what they once were, and Buzzwole, it grows. Its muscles swell, its exoskeleton darkens, and it becomes even more formidable than before. This mechanism is the key to understanding its behavior. Buzzwole is in a constant state of flexing. It poses, it strikes exaggerated muscle-bound stances, it puffs out its chest and curls its arms. To an outside observer, it might look comical, even absurd, but it is anything but. That flexing is a threat display, a way to assess its own strength and intimidate potential rivals or prey. But more than that, it is a warning. When Buzzwole stops flexing and goes still, when its muscles seem to relax and its body goes quiet, that means it has found something worth the effort. That stillness is the prelude to a strike. The moment it stops showing off, it is already computing the fastest path to drive its needle into you. The flexing is the last thing you see before it decides you are worth absorbing. The Ultra Jungle shaped Buzzwole into a perfect predator for a world where energy was scarce and competition was lethal. On Earth, that makes it a walking ecological crisis. It doesn't hunt for food in the traditional sense. It hunts for fuel. And because it can absorb energy so efficiently, it can grow stronger with every encounter. There is no limit to its potential growth, no ceiling to its power, as long as there is something to drain. Now, imagine the first time a Buzzwole emerged from an Ultra Wormhole over Melemele Island, the sky torn open, and this massive insectoid body crashed into the jungle. The local Pokémon scattered in panic. Tapu Koko, the guardian deity of Melemele, came to face it. And what followed was not a battle of wits or a struggle of ideology. It was a contest of pure force. Tapu Koko is no weakling, but Buzzwole's ability to absorb energy mid-combat made it nearly impossible to defeat through conventional means. Every blow Tapu Koko landed only gave Buzzwole more time to study its opponent, to calculate the optimal moment to use that proboscis. Thankfully, the Ether Foundation and the International Police were able to capture the Buzzwole before it could drain entire ecosystems. But its presence left a deep scar on Alola, a reminder that not all visitors from ultraspace come with the subtlety of a parasitic jellyfish. Some come with the blunt, terrifying efficiency of a creature that has never known anything but the law of the jungle, taken to its most literal extreme. And that brings us to the next Ultra Beast, the the one that appeared alongside Buzzwole in that same initial wave, where Buzzwole was all raw, overwhelming power. Something that would challenge the way we think about beauty, fear, and the things we are drawn to, even when we know they are dangerous. Its name, its purpose, and the chilling elegance of its form we'll explore very soon. The previous chapter left us in the Ultra Jungle, where Buzzwole flexes its impossible muscles and drains the life from anything unfortunate enough to cross its path. But Buzzwole is only half of the story. Its counterpart, the one the international police catalogued as UB2 Beauty, moves through the world like a living contradiction, where Buzzwole is brute force made flesh. Pheromosa is elegance weaponized, and it is this elegance that makes it so terribly difficult to comprehend. There is a reason why eyewitness accounts of Pheromosa often sound like fever dreams. People describe a streak of white light, woman-shaped blur, that leaves afterimages in the retina. The creature's speed is not merely fast, it is uncanny, defying the physics that govern our dimension. Pheromosa can cross a city block in a fraction of a heartbeat, and that speed is not just for show. It is a survival mechanism, a hunting tool, and most disturbingly, a method of manipulation. You see, Pheromosa does not rely on brute force to subdue its prey. Instead, it releases pheromones, chemical signals so potent that they override the nervous system of any creature within range. These pheromones do not simply attract, they bewilder, they seduce, they paralyze. A victim caught in the cloud loses all sense of danger, drawn toward the source of the scent as if hypnotized, and by the time they realize what is happening, Pheromosa has already struck. Its needle-like limbs piercing flesh before the brain can even register pain. But there is something far stranger about Pheromosa than its speed or its chemical mastery, something that speaks to the very nature of its home dimension. Every report of Pheromosa in the Pokémon world notes the same bizarre behavior. It refuses to touch the ground. It hovers, skims and leaps without ever allowing its body to make contact with the soil, the grass, the concrete of our world. And this is not a quirk, it is a biological imperative. Pheromosa comes from a dimension that is, for lack of a better word, pristine. Its homeworld is a place of blinding light and sterile surfaces, where nothing decays and no filth accumulates. The atmosphere is thin, the ground is polished to an impossible shine, and the very concept of dirt is foreign. In that environment, Pheromosa evolved to be a perfect predator, light, fast, and clean. Its body is covered in a fine, crystalline dust that repels any particle it touches. But when it entered our world through an Ultra Wormhole, it encountered something it had never experienced before. Pollution. Our air is thick with moisture, pollen, microscopic debris. Our soil is alive with bacteria and fungi, and the remains of countless generations. To Pheromosa, this is not a world of life, it is a world of rot. The moment its feet touch the ground, it feels a contamination that is physically painful. Its crystalline coating begins to degrade. Its sensors read our environment as a toxic waste, and so it keeps itself aloft, hovering above a surface it finds revolting, driven by an evolutionary instinct to avoid contact at all costs. This is why Pheromosa views the Pokémon world as a disgusting, polluted wasteland. It is not being dramatic, it is being honest. To a creature adapted to absolute sterility, our planet is a cesspool, and that revulsion drives its behavior in ways that are hard to predict. It does not come here to conquer or to feed in the usual sense. It comes here because the Ultra Wormhole opened and it is trapped. And in its panic, it lashes out with speed that leaves no time for mercy. But there is another layer to this fear. Pheromosa's beauty is not a coincidence. Its slender, almost humanoid form, its luminous white exoskeleton, the way it moves like a dancer, all of this is designed to attract attention. In its homeworld, such beauty is a lure. Predators use grace to draw prey close, and prey use grace to hypnotize predators. Pheromosa sits at the top of that food chain, and its appearance is as much a weapon as its pheromones. The combination is lethal. When researchers first studied Pheromosa, they noted that its pheromones do not only affect living creatures, They can alter the behavior of machines, disrupting sensors and confusing automated systems. There is a theory that the pheromones operate on a quantum level, interfering with the fundamental bonds that hold matter together. If that is true, then Pheromosa is not just a biological organism. It is a force of nature, a living chemical reaction that reshapes reality around it. And yet, for all its power, Pheromosa is a tragic figure. It does not belong here. It cannot touch anything without feeling violated. Its every movement is a desperate attempt to escape the filth that clings to our dimension. The speed that terrifies us is also its prison. It must keep moving, always, because to stop is to sink into the contamination that it cannot bear. The question then becomes, what happens when a creature so alien, so beautiful, and so horrified by our world is forced to stay? The answer lies not in Pheromosa itself, but in the response of the humans who faced it. They realized that conventional weapons and ordinary Pokeballs were useless. They needed something new, something designed specifically to counter beings that do not obey the rules of our universe. They needed a weapon born from desperation, a project that would push science to its darkest edges. That project would come to be known as the Beast Killer Project, and its creation would forever change the way we understand the boundary between life and machine. Pheromosa's terror was not just in its speed, it was in the revulsion it felt for our world. The Ultra Beast, known as the Lithe One, saw Alola as a filthy, polluted place, and it moved through our skies with a desperate need to escape the contamination of our very air. That disgust, that alien perspective, forced the Ether Foundation to confront a terrifying truth. These creatures were not just invaders, they were avatars of entirely incompatible ecosystems, and if their mere presence could destabilize an island, their unchecked aggression could erase humanity's foothold in this dimension. So, deep beneath the gleaming domes of Ether Paradise, in laboratories sealed from sunlight and public oversight, a desperate project was born. It had no official name at first, only a classified directive: create something that could fight the stars. This was the Beast Killer Project, and its only goal was to forge a weapon that could stand against beings whose power rivaled the legendary Pokémon of myth. But to build such a weapon, the scientists had to understand a fundamental problem. No conventional Pokémon, no matter how trained, could reliably harm an Ultra Beast. Standard Pokeballs failed, standard attacks glanced off. The Foundation needed a new kind of life. The secret labs of Ether Paradise, hummed with the quiet whir of containment fields and the soft, rhythmic beat of synthetic hearts. In these sterile rooms, researchers began the most ethically ambiguous work of their careers: the creation of an artificial Pokémon. They called it the Beast Killer, but its codename would eventually be Type Null. This creature was designed from the ground up as a combat chassis, a blank slate onto which the power of any type could be grafted. Its body was a marvel of biomechanical engineering, covered in a heavy masked helmet that suppressed its own latent energy, keeping it dormant until activation. The helmet was not a crown, it was a cage, because the power inside Type Null was built to exceed the natural order. Why did humans feel the need to play God to defend against the stars? Because the stars had opened, and what emerged was not a message of wonder. It was a parade of beings that regarded our reality as a resource to be drained, a habitat to be colonized, or a nuisance to be avoided. The Ultra Beasts did not negotiate. They did not communicate in languages we could decipher. Nihilego had already demonstrated how easily a human mind could be hollowed out. Luzamine, once a brilliant and loving mother, had become a puppet, her obsession amplified into a monstrous, zealous hunger for the very entities that were consuming her. If a single alien parasite could topple the head of a global research foundation, what could a full swarm do? The Beast Killer Project was not born from arrogance alone, but from fear. The cold, rational fear that humanity had no answer to the unknown, and that the unknown was knocking at every Ultra Wormhole. At the heart of this project lay a revolutionary piece of technology, the RKS system. RKS stood for the initials of the creator of the universe in the Pokémon world, Arceus. Yes, the scientists named their system after the original being who shaped reality itself. It was a desperate attempt to mimic the creator of the universe. The RKS system allowed type Null to adapt its type on the fly, swapping between any of the 18 elemental affinities using a memory chip. In theory, this made it the perfect counter to any Ultra Beast. If Buzzwole resisted electric, the system could shift to flying. If Pheromosa fled from fire, it could flame its weapon. But more than that, the RKS system was a philosophical statement. If the Ultra Beasts were anomalies from beyond the known laws of physics, then humanity would respond by building a being that could rewrite its own nature. A living, breathing contingency plan. But the creation of type Null was not clean. The project left scars. The creature itself was a prisoner in its own body, kept in constant lockdown by the helmet that restrained its full power. It was not a partner, it was a tool. And the scientists who built it, who pored over genetic sequences and combat simulations, knew they were crossing a line. They were manufacturing a living weapon, something that could kill without hesitation. Because the alternative was the potential extinction of life as they knew it. The Beast Killer project was a reflection of humanity's deepest insecurity. That we are not the apex of this universe, and that our survival depends on our ability to become gods ourselves. When type Null was finally completed, it was stored in the lowest levels of Aether Paradise, under constant guard. It did not move. It did not eat. It simply waited, its single eye glowing behind the mask, ready to be activated against an enemy that had not yet reached our shores. But the irony of the Beast Killer project, that it created a creature that was itself a kind of Ultra Beast, a being built from human desperation, unnatural, and trapped between two worlds. The same fear that drove the Aether Foundation to open the first Ultra Wormholes now drove them to create a monster to close them. And yet the Ultra Beasts kept coming. The invasion of Alola was not a single event, it was a cascade. After Nihilego and Buzzwole and Pheromosa, the next threat emerged not from the jungle or the wasteland, but from a place devoid of energy, a dimension where the only currency was electricity. This creature would not flex its muscles or poison a mind. It would simply drain the life from every wire, every circuit, every source of power it could find, leaving whole islands in darkness and silence. The next chapter of this story is about a hunger that cannot be satisfied, an endless thirst for current, and the only thing standing in its way for now is a weapon that wears a mask made of its own fear. The Beast Killer project was born from fear. The fear that humanity, for all its technology and all its Pokémon, had no real answer to what was coming. Type Null was a weapon shaped like a god, a desperate gamble to create something that could stand against the unknown. But while the scientists at Aether Paradise were still perfecting their artificial beast, while the first Silverly was still locked in its restraints, the next visitor was already crossing the void. And it did not announce itself with a battle cry or a territorial display. It announced itself with silence. The first sign of Xurkitry's arrival was not a sighting, it was a sound. Or rather, the absence of sound. Across the island of Ula Ula, every machine that hummed, every light that glowed, every refrigerator that cycled its compressor, all of it stopped at once. In the cities, the blackout was instant and total. Traffic lights died. Street lamps went dark, televisions flickered to nothing. People stepped out of their homes into a night that was suddenly deeper than it had any right to be. And they looked up, and there it was, standing on the shore of Mali Garden, where the water lapped against the artificial banks, a figure that did not belong. It was tall, taller than any human, taller than any building in the immediate vicinity. Its body was a chaotic tangle of cables, bright yellow and blue wires that writhed and coiled around a central core of blinding white light. It had no face, no eyes, no mouth, but it had limbs, long spindly appendages that ended in branching tendrils, each one crackling with an energy that seemed to hunger for something it could not find in the air. The creature looked like a mass of sentient wiring that had been pulled from the guts of a machine and given a terrible, animate life. It did not walk like an animal. It moved in jerky, stuttering motions, as if it was learning the physics of this world, one step at a time. Each movement left a faint after-image of electricity in the air, a ghost of light that lingered for a second before fading. It was not beautiful. It was not majestic. It was something that had been born in a dimension where light was the only currency, and it had come here to collect. The reason circuitry anchors itself into the earth is not aggression, it is survival. In its home dimension, the ultraplan, energy is scarce. Everything there is built around the constant, desperate search for a charge. Circuitry evolved to become a living conduit, a body that exists only to capture and store electricity. But on Earth, it found something it had never experienced before. A planet that hummed with a constant, steady current, power lines, generators, the natural electromagnetic field of the world itself. It sensed all of it, and it did not understand the concept of theft. It understood only the endless hunger for current. When it stood on that shore, it did not attack. It simply rooted itself. The tendrils at the base of its body, which resemble a bundle of thick electrical cords, plunged into the ground, and then it began to drink. It drained the power grids of Ula Ula Island in a matter of minutes. Substations overloaded and exploded in showers of sparks. Backup generators kicked on, only to be drained dry within seconds. The creature did not care about the panic it caused. It did not know that the lights it was stealing were connected to hospitals, to homes, to people who depended on them. It only knew that for the first time in what must have been eons, it was full. The research notes from the Ether Foundation describe a phenomenon they called energy parasitism. But that word implies a conscious choice. Circuitry does not choose to steal power the way a thief chooses a target. It does so the way a plant turns towards sunlight, without thought, without malice, driven by a biological imperative so ancient and so absolute that it cannot be ignored. When its internal charge runs low, it seeks out the nearest source. Power plants, lightning storms, the geothermal currents running deep beneath the earth. It will bury its plug-like appendages into the soil and draw up the planet's own natural energy, drinking from the world itself. And when it is fully charged, it does not attack. It does not destroy for pleasure. It simply stands there, crackling and humming, a monument of borrowed light. But to the people of Alola, to the scientists who watched it from behind reinforced glass, there was no comfort in that stillness, because they knew what it meant. If circuitry was here, if it had crossed through an ultra wormhole that Lucamine had pried open, then it was not alone. The hunger it represented was not an individual trait. It was the signature of a whole dimension, a place where everything, every creature, every plant, every atom was defined by a desperate, unrelenting need. The question that haunted the researchers was not how to capture circuitry. They had beast balls for that. The question was what happened when a creature that had evolved to drain an entire planet arrived on a world that had never faced such a predator. And if you look closely at the accounts of that night, the blackout, the silent figure on the shore, the way every light on the island died in an instant, you realize something. That was not an invasion. That was a landing. The first step of a thing that had no concept of borders or property, only the endless, mindless pursuit of the one thing it needed to survive. And as the emergency generators sputtered back to life, and the people of Ula Ula began to emerge from their darkened homes, the creature was already gone. It had moved inland, searching for a stronger current, leaving behind a trail of fried circuits and dead batteries. But its presence lingered, because when you look at the patterns of the Ultra Beasts, you begin to notice something unsettling. They do not seem to fit together by accident. There is a logic to them, a framework that suggests something deeper about their nature, a pattern that some researchers have begun to call the 7 deadly sins theory. And that theory starts with the first beast, and it ends with something far older than even the Ultra Wormholes themselves. You watch the lights of the Alolan cities flicker and die, one by one, as circuitry stands at the heart of the blackout, a tangle of luminous wires drinking from every socket, every generator, every pulse of current the human world can offer. But this creature is not just a thief of electricity. It is a living symbol of something far older, far more disturbing, and the more you study its behavior, the more you realize that each of the 7 original Ultra Beasts may represent a different face of the same ancient darkness. A theory has grown quietly among the community, whispered in forums and lore discussions, that these creatures are not random invaders from other dimensions, but embodiments of the 7 deadly sins themselves. And if that theory holds any truth, then circuitry is not merely hungry for power. It is the sin of greed made manifest in copper and light. Look closer at this beast. It does not consume electricity for survival alone. It hoards it, drains it, stores it in such vast quantities that its body glows with stolen brilliance. In the Ultra Plant, the dimension it calls home, energy is scarce, a world where even the air hums with desperation. Circuitry evolved to absorb and stockpile every stray volt it could find. But when it crossed into our world, it found a paradise of abundance. Power plants, transformers, the entire grid of civilization, an endless buffet. And it does not simply eat its fill. It takes more than it could ever need. It discharges 1,000,000 volts in a single burst. Yet it continues to drain the land, long after its reserves are full. This is not hunger. This is gluttony of energy, a greed so insatiable that it mirrors our own modern consumption. The way humanity strips the earth of resources, burns through fossil fuels, and leaves behind a hollowed-out world. Circuitry is a mirror held up to our own endless appetite, and in that reflection, the darkness is impossible to ignore. But the theory goes deeper. Each of the original 7 Ultra Beasts, introduced in Pokémon Sun and Moon, carries a behavioral signature that aligns with a specific sin. Nihilego, the parasitic jellyfish, embodies gluttony not for food but for control. It latches onto a host and consumes their will, their identity, their very self, until nothing remains but a hollow puppet driven by the beast's own venom. Buzzwole, with its obsessive flexing and relentless drive to dominate, is pride, the need to assert superiority, to prove itself the strongest in the ultra jungle where only the fittest survive. Pheromosa, the elegant and disgusted creature, represents lust, but not desire in the human sense, rather a compulsive, almost erotic attraction to its own beauty, and a revulsion toward everything it deems unclean. And then there is circuitry, greed, the endless, mindless taking, the refusal to stop, even when it has more than enough. What makes this theory so compelling is not just the surface parallels, but the thematic darkness hidden beneath the colourful designs. These ultra beasts look like neon sculptures, like something from a science fiction carnival, bright, strange, almost playful. Circuitry resembles a bundle of holiday lights, a tangle of festive cables. Buzzwole is a cartoonishly muscular mosquito. Pheromosa might be mistaken for a fashion model from another galaxy, but this whimsical appearance is a mask. Underneath, each one operates on a single destructive impulse, a sin so primal that it warps the very ecosystem it enters. The games never confirm the connection outright, but the evidence is woven into their behavior, their ecology, their very names. UB1 Symbiont, UB2 Absorption, UB3 Lightning. They are not given traditional names until the player discovers them, as if the international police refuses to acknowledge them as anything other than classified threats. And perhaps that is the real horror. The sins these beasts represent are not alien. They are human. Greed, pride, gluttony, lust. These are the same impulses that drive our own species to conquer, to pillage, to destroy. In the Ultra Beasts, ourselves amplified, stripped of morality, free to indulge every base instinct without restraint. Circuitry does not steal power because it is evil. It steals because that is simply what it does. The same way a fire burns or a flood rises. It is greed without conscience, and that is what makes it so terrifying. when the lights go out across Alola, when the cities fall silent and dark. You are not facing a monster, you are facing the consequence of desire without end. And as the grid fails, and the last generator sputters into silence, something else begins to stir in the distance. A glint of metal, a fold of sharp polished edges. The next beast is not hungry for electricity, it hungers for something far more precise. Something that will test not just the power grid, but the very concept of shape and form. The steel is folding, and when it unfolds, the world will never look at paper the same way again. The theory of the 7 deadly sins cast a long shadow over the Ultra Beasts, and perhaps no creature embodies that concept more literally than the one we turn to now. Xurkitree, the living lightning, represented an endless hunger for power, a creature of pure consumption that saw our world as nothing more than a battery to drain. But what if the sin was not greed, but something far more ancient? What if the sin was wrath, perfected into a form so sharp it barely exists in our dimension? This is the story of Kartana, the blade that does not know it cuts. Kartana is known by its designation Ub4, the steel origami. It is a name that sounds almost delicate, like a paper ornament folded by careful hands. But there is nothing delicate about this being. The truth of Kartana is a paradox of scale and intention. When it first emerged from an Ultra Wormhole over the Alola region, witnesses reported something that looked like a floating piece of origami, barely the size of a human hand. It drifted silently, almost beautiful in its simplicity, but that beauty was a lie. The moment a stray gust of wind pushed it toward a nearby skyscraper, the truth became horrifyingly clear. Kartana did not collide with the building, it passed through it. Not by phasing, not by any mystical intangibility, but by cutting. The creature's edge is so impossibly thin, so atomically sharp, that it severed steel and concrete as if they were mist. The skyscraper did not topple. It simply split in two along a single razor-straight line from top to bottom. The cut was so clean that the two halves stood for a moment before sliding apart. Kartana is deceptive in size. What appears to be a small paper figure is actually a creature whose body is folded into multiple dimensions. Its true surface area, if unfolded, would be vast, but it compresses itself into our reality as a tiny object. That compression gives it incredible density and a cutting edge that is sharp at the molecular level. It can slice through anything, including other Ultra Beasts. There are reports that a single Kartana could fell an entire city if it were set loose with purpose. But that is the most chilling part. Kartana does not have purpose. It does not intend harm. It is simply a creature that exists in a state of constant cutting, and it does not realize it is a living weapon. The horror of a creature that doesn't realize it is a living weapon is not the horror of malice. It is the horror of innocence wrapped in destruction. Imagine a leaf falling from a tree, but that leaf is made of folded steel and every edge is a blade. The leaf does not want to cut you, it just falls, and you bleed. Kartana moves through the world the same way. It drifts, it turns, it folds and unfolds its paper-like body in response to environmental stimuli. It does not attack, it simply is. And because it is, everything around it gets severed. Researchers who have studied Kartana up close describe a sense of profound unease, because the creature shows no aggression, no emotion, no awareness of the devastation left in its wake. It is a perfect weapon that has never been wielded. To understand Kartana, we must understand its home. The Ultra Forest is not a forest of trees and leaves. It is a forest of blades. In that dimension, the very air is a cutting field. Everything is in a state of perpetual fission, from the flora to the fauna. Survival there means being sharp enough to exist without being shredded. Kartana evolved in an environment where the ground itself can shear through flesh, where the wind carries invisible razors. Over eons, its body became the ultimate response, a form so sharp that nothing can cut it, because it cuts everything first. The Ultra Forest is a place of constant cutting. There is no stillness, no peace, only the endless friction of matter against matter, and Kartana is the apex of that ecosystem, a being that does not just survive the forest, but is indistinguishable from the forest's own violence. When Kartana enters our world, it brings that environment with it in a subtle way. It does not emit heat or radiation, it emits the logic of cutting. Anything that gets too close is subject to the same dimensional pressure that governs its home. But Kartana does not understand that our world is soft, that our buildings are not made of the same crystalline sharpness. It moves through our cities the way it moved through its own forest, oblivious to the fact that what is harmless there is catastrophic here. This is the true terror. A creature that is not evil, not hungry, not angry, just fundamentally incompatible with reality itself. We are the ones who are in its way. As we witness the silent, drifting path of Kartana across Alola, we realize that the Ultra Beasts are not invaders in the traditional sense. They are refugees of dimensions so alien that their very presence unravels our own. And what of the next? What of the massive, enigmatic silhouette that looms over the ocean? A creature made of bamboo and metal, drifting like a starship through the night. We will turn to that next, to the being known as Celesteela, the bamboo starship, and discover what it means for a creature to carry an entire world within its hollow body. Before we dive deeper into this incredible journey, I'm curious. Where in the world are you watching this from? Drop a comment below and let our global community know. And if you're finding this as mind-blowing as I am, hit that like button to help more people discover this story. Kartana, that origami blade no larger than a human hand, had shown us that destruction does not require size. It could shear through steel with the casual indifference of a gust of wind. But now, we turn our gaze to something that exists at the opposite end of the dimensional scale, something that does not slice, it crushes. Celesteela is known as the launch beast, and it earns that name with every molecule of its being. The first thing you notice about this Ultra Beast is not its appearance, but its weight. It is classified as the heaviest known non-legendary creature to ever emerge from an Ultra Wormhole, with a mass that rivals the largest steel skyscrapers. But unlike those static giants, Celesteela can move, and when it moves like a rocket. Imagine a creature that is essentially a living rocket ship, a bamboo starship, crafted from a material that looks like polished metal, but feels organic. Its body is a towering cylinder of segmented plates, reminiscent of the bamboo shoots that grow in the forests of our world, but forged from an alloy that has no natural counterpart on Earth. The skin is metallic, yet it is alive. It pulses with a faint internal glow, and when you look closely, you can see veins of glowing energy running through its surface, like the filament inside a light bulb. This is not armor, this is its flesh. The horror of Celesteela lies in its propulsion system. Deep within its central cavity, it generates a flammable gas of unknown composition. Researchers at Aether Foundation detected traces of compounds that should not exist in any stable biological system. This gas is highly volatile, and the creature uses it to launch itself at incredible speeds. When Celesteela prepares to move, it releases this gas from vents on its underside and ignites it with a spark from its internal organs. The result is a controlled explosion that propels it forward like a missile. But here is the biological mystery that keeps biologists awake at night. How does a creature made of metal survive the internal combustion required for high-speed launch? The pressures, the temperatures, the sheer force of acceleration would shatter any normal living thing. Celesteela does not just survive it, it thrives. Its metallic skin is not rigid, it is flexible, able to absorb and distribute shock across its entire form. The flammable gas is not stored in a single chamber. It is distributed through a network of sacs and tubes, each one lined with a heat-resistant membrane that can withstand temperatures that would melt steel. This creature can reach speeds that violate what we think is possible for a biological entity. It has been observed crossing vast distances in ultra space in what appears to be a single leap, using its launch capability to travel from one-dimensional pocket to another. In the ecosystem of ultra space, Celesteela serves as a long-range scout. It is the eyes and ears of its dimension, sent out to survey distant worlds and report back, if that is even the right word. It does not communicate in sounds we can hear. It leaves behind trails of ionized particles, patterns of light that are read by other Ultra Beasts. When it appeared in Alola, it did not land softly. It fell from the sky like a meteor, cratering the earth with its impact. The ground shook for miles, and then it just stood there, towering and silent, its vents still hissing with residual gas. It did not attack, it simply observed. It was scanning, cataloguing, sending data back through the wormhole. For the people who saw it, the terror was not in what it did, but in what it represented. A scout from a dimension that does not care about us, sent to map our world as if we were just another rock in the void. And now we must look at what comes next. The story of Ultra Beasts is not only about the creatures themselves, but about the human response to them. There are files hidden deep in the archives of the International Police that detail what happened when the scouts reported back. Those files contain information that has never been shared with the public, records of encounters that were too strange, too dangerous, or simply too unbelievable to release. The International Police files hold the accounts of agents who faced Ultra Beasts when no one else was watching, who saw what happens when a scout becomes a signal for something worse. That story is waiting for you, and it will change everything you think you know about the invasion of Alola. Celesteela, the bamboo starship, had barely vanished back into its wormhole when the International Police received a flood of reports from across Alola. Citizens described a sky-splitting roar and a shadow that blotted out the sun for a single terrifying moment before the beast accelerated beyond sight. But while the public saw only a vanishing giant, the International Police saw something else entirely. A pattern. This wasn't the first time they had encountered creatures from beyond known space. In fact, they had been tracking these anomalies for years, long before the Alola crisis ever made headlines. The organization's most enigmatic operative, a man known only by the codename Looker, had spent decades chasing the edges of reality. His file, buried deep within the International Police archives, contains records of incidents that defy conventional explanation. Looker himself was not an ordinary agent. His career began with routine criminal investigations. But something shifted after he encountered a being that should not exist. That encounter left him with a fragmented memory and a lingering sense that the world he knew was only a thin membrane over something vast and alien. He became obsessed with the concept of fallers who had crossed through Ultra Wormholes and returned, changed. Fallers are rare. Most who enter Ultra space never come back. The dimensions there operate under different physical laws, and the human mind is not built to process them. Those who do return often suffer from what the International Police classify as dimensional disorientation syndrome. They report vivid hallucinations, chronic insomnia, and a persistent sense of being watched by eyes that exist just outside the spectrum of visible light. Some lose the ability to distinguish between memories from Earth and memories from the other side. One follower described it as having two sets of childhood recollections that contradict each other, yet both feel equally real. The psychological trauma is not merely emotional, it rewires the brain's perception of time and space. In extreme cases, fallers have been known to involuntarily phase between dimensions, flickering out of sight for seconds at a time, appearing nowhere, and then back again. Looker understood this better than most. He had been tasked with tracking and monitoring these individuals, but also with recruiting those who retained enough sanity to assist in the hunt. The International Police developed specialized equipment to detect interdimensional invaders, devices that measured quantum resonance, exotic particle emissions, and gravitational lensing anomalies that preceded wormhole openings. One such device, the Ultra Reconnaissance Tracker, could pinpoint the signature of an Ultra Beast from over 100 kilometers away, provided the beast was actively using its powers, but the equipment was imperfect. The creatures learned to mask their signatures, and the trackers sometimes registered false positives from common weather patterns or electrical storms. Luca spent countless nights calibrating the arrays, sleeping in the back of a nondescript van, chasing signals that led to empty fields or, worst, to scenes of devastation left moments before arrival. It was during one of these hunts that he encountered a fella who would change everything. Her name was Annabelle. She had once been a frontier brain in the battle frontier, a trainer of exceptional skill. But after an incident in a tower that bridged dimensions, she vanished. When she reappeared years later, she had no memory of where she had been, only fragmented images of endless corridors and a sky filled with unblinking stars. Luca took her under his wing. Together, they became the International Police's most effective unit against Ultra Beasts. Annabelle's instincts had sharpened beyond human norms. She could sense when a wormhole was about to open, feel the static charge in the air moments before an invasion. It was a gift born of trauma, a scar that never healed. The files they compiled are thick with redacted passages and classified code names. But one name appears repeatedly. The fella known as the Professor, a researcher who had stumbled into ultraspace while testing a prototype warp device. He returned, but his mind was fractured. He would draw diagrams of alien geometries on the walls of his containment cell, mumbling about the symbiont that had touched him. The International Police kept him in a facility far from the public eye, studying his delusions for clues about the beasts. They learned from him that ultraspace was not a single dimension, but a network, a honeycomb of realities, each with its own laws. And some of those laws were hungry. Luca's secret history is not just one of chasing monsters. It is the story of a man who gave up his own identity to hold back a tide that most people will never know exists. He adopted code names, changed his appearance, severed ties with his past. In his locker at the International Police headquarters, there is a single photograph, a woman and a child, their faces scratched out. He never speaks of them. Some say they were lost to a wormhole during an early investigation. Others believe they were never real at all, that Luca himself might be a fella who forgot his own origin. The tracking equipment he uses has also evolved. The latest devices, issued to elite agents, are worn as bracelets that vibrate when an ultra beast is near. They measure dimensional friction, the subtle drag that occurs when a being from another reality forces its way into ours. The bracelets glow with a faint amber light when the friction increases, and they pulse red when the beast is actively hunting. It is a terrible thing to see an agent's wrist suddenly flare crimson in the dead of night, knowing that something with eyes like nebulae is drawing closer. And yet, for all their advanced technology, the International Police have never captured an ultra beast alive. They have killed some, driven others back, but containment has always failed. The beasts simply phase out, slipping between atoms, returning to the spaces between spaces. It is as if they are not truly here. Only projections, avatars of something far larger and more ancient. That is why the creation of the Beast Ball was so critical. And that brings us directly to Faber's ambition and the Beast Ball, the next chapter in this story of human desperation against the unknown. Faber, the Ether Foundation's lead scientist, saw the failures of the International Police as an opportunity. He believed that with the right technology, a single man could capture what a whole agency could not, and he was willing to break every ethical boundary to prove it. We left off in the last chapter with the International Police, with Luca, and with the strange truth of the Fallas. Those humans who walked through an ultra wormhole and came back, changed. Their minds fractured, their memories displaced. It's a kind of trauma that the Ether Foundation knew all too well, because while the police were tracking the aftermath of these dimensional tears, someone else was studying the cause. Someone who saw the arrival of ultra beasts not as a catastrophe, but as an opportunity. Faber, the Ether Foundation's branch chief, its head scientist, was a man of immense pride and even greater ambition. He looked at the creatures spilling out of ultra space, and he did not see a threat. He saw raw data. He saw a riddle that needed solving, and chief among those riddles was the simple, devastating fact that a standard Pokeball failed utterly against these beings. You could throw a dozen of the most advanced capture devices at a Nihilego, and they would simply fall to the ground, inert, unresponsive. The mechanism inside a Pokeball relies on one fundamental principle. It scans for the biological signature of a Pokémon. It reads DNA, energy patterns, life force. But what happens when the creature you are trying to capture does not have DNA in any way that a Pokeball can recognize? What happens when its molecular structure is not compatible with the very physics of our universe? That is the reality of an Ultra Beast. They are not Pokémon. They are something else. Something that exists outside the system of life that we understand. And so Faber realized that to catch one, you would have to build a new kind of cage. A cage that did not try to conform the creature to our world, but instead wrapped itself around the very concept of non-matter. The unethical engineering that followed is a chapter of the Ether Foundation's history that they would prefer to forget. The Beast Ball is a technological marvel, but it is also a confession of failure. It works by generating a field that does not attempt to measure a life form's compatibility. Instead, it forces a temporary, artificial resonance between the ball's internal space and the Ultra Beast's home dimension. In other words, the Beast Ball does not capture the creature by convincing it to stay. It captures it by tricking it, by making the interior feel so much like its own reality that the Ultra Beast is momentarily confused. And in that sliver of confusion, the seal locks. But to create that resonance, Faber had to bypass every ethical safeguard the Ether Foundation had built. He had to replicate the exact energy signature of an Ultra Wormhole. That meant drawing power from the same source that had swallowed Mon. It meant using data from the UBs that had already been catalogued, often from the traumatic encounters that had scarred the Fallas. The hidden costs of this technological breakthrough were not measured in money, they were measured in sanity. The researchers who worked on the Beast Ball reported nightmares. They reported feeling watched. Some of them began to speak of a distant, humming sound that only they could hear, like the electrical whisper of circuitry's home dimension. And then there was the matter of testing. The first prototype Beast Ball was not thrown at an Ultra Beast. It was thrown at a Pokémon that had been exposed to ultra space, a creature whose biology had been altered by the dimensional bleed. The ball worked, but the Pokémon inside it did not survive. The convulsions, the screaming, the final stillness. Faber recorded it all. He filed the results, and he pushed forward. The Beast Ball that you can obtain in the games is a refined version, but it is still built on the same foundation. It is still a device that forces a momentary breach between worlds. Every time you use it, you are reopening a tiny hole in reality, just wide enough to let a nightmare slip inside. And the Ultra Beast, once captured, is never truly contained, is merely waiting, because the ball cannot change what it is. It can only isolate it. This is the uncomfortable truth behind the Ether Foundation's greatest achievement. They solved the problem of capturing the uncapturable, but only by embracing the very instability that made Ultra Beasts so dangerous in the first place. Faber's ambition gave Alola a weapon, but it also gave them a reminder that some doors once opened do not fully close. And those doors, they lead to places where hunger is not just a feeling, it is a law, it is a creature, it is the void that swallows stars. And that void is coming next. The Ether Foundation's Beast Ball was a marvel of ethical compromise, a device designed to imprison something that, by all biological standards, should not exist. But even the most advanced containment technology in the known universe presumes you can find the thing you want to catch. And that, as the international police would soon learn, was the central problem with UB5. You see, the beast known as Guzzlord does not simply occupy space, it consumes it. And in its home dimension, there is nothing left to contain. Let me tell you about a creature that has no off switch. Guzzlord's anatomy is a nightmare written in flesh and hunger. From the outside, it appears as a towering, draconic behemoth covered in black and red plating, with a gaping maw that takes up most of its torso. But the true horror is not what you see. It is what you cannot see. Guzzlord has no anus, no digestive waste system whatsoever. Everything it swallows is simply absorbed, or stored, or turned into more of itself. Because the creature's cells are built to metabolize matter at an almost perfect efficiency, there is no exit. The beast is a sealed system of perpetual consumption. And if you think that sounds unsustainable, you are right. In its native dimension, Guzzlord has eaten everything, literally everything. The entire ecosystem, the cities, the mountains, the oceans, the atmosphere itself, all consumed. What remains is a wasteland, the Ultra Recon Squad, the Ultra Ruin. It is a world that has been hollowed out from the inside. The sky is a permanent, choking dust cloud. The ground is barren rock, stripped of nutrients. There is no wind, no water, no life, just silence. The occasional tremor of a Guzzlord moving through the darkness. Because there is never just one. They are the apex predators of a dead world. And they are the reason that world is dead. Now consider the dark future this represents. The Ultra Ruin is not a punishment. It is a consequence. Guzzlord does not hate. It does not plan. It merely consumes, because that is all it knows how to do. And in its dimension, this behavior has led to complete environmental collapse. The beast is the ultimate personification of uncontrolled consumption. The living embodiment of a system that takes and takes until there is nothing left to take. It is not evil in the moral sense. It is a biological inevitability, like a cancer that does not know it is killing its host. When the first Guzzlord emerged through an Ultra Wormhole into Alola, the devastation was immediate. It did not attack. It simply began to eat. Buildings, trees, vehicles, Pokémon, it all went into that endless maw. And because it has no waste system, the mass it consumes is converted directly into body weight. A single Guzzlord can double its size in a matter of hours if left unchecked. There is no satiety, no limit. The only way to stop it is to drive it back into the wormhole, or to destroy it before it grows too large to contain. The international police classified Guzzlord as a Class A extinction level threat, not because of aggression, but because of inevitability. If a Guzzlord were to establish itself on Earth, it would not conquer. It would erode. It would peel away the planet layer by layer, and the end would come not with a bang, but with the slow grinding sound of a creature that never stops chewing. And yet, there is a terrible poetry to this beast. It is not a monster of malice. It is a mirror. What in Guzzlord is our own potential future? A world where resource consumption has no boundary, where waste is not processed but simply ignored, where the idea of sustainability is laughed out of existence. The Ultra Ruin is not a distant dimension. It is a warning, a photograph of what happens when a civilization forgets that nothing is infinite. But what happened in the Ultra Ruin after the last Guzzlord finished its meal? What silence fell upon that world when there was nothing left to devour? The answer lies in the stillness between the wormholes, in the absence of light and sound. That is the true horror of U5, not the eating, the emptiness that remains. And in our next chapter, we will step into that emptiness and listen to the silence of the Ultra Ruin. We left off in the Ultra Ruin, a place where the sky is the colour of bruised metal and the land is laced with shattered concrete and corroded steel. This is the alternate Timeline version of Howoli City, but not a single soul walks its streets. There are no lights in the windows, no music from the marina, just the wind howling through broken glass and the distant guttural rumble of something massive shifting in the dark. You have to understand that this city was once alive. In the world we know, Howoli bustles with tourists and locals, with ice cream carts and the gentle crash of waves against the pier. But here in the Ultra Ruin, that life is gone. The buildings still stand, more or less, but they are hollow shells. The roads are cracked, overtaken by a strange, blackened moss that seems to drink in the weak light. And everywhere, there are signs of a desperate last stand. Barricades made of overturned cars, spray-painted warnings on walls, in a language that looks almost like Alolan but isn't quite right. Someone tried to fight. Someone tried to hold the line, but the line was eaten. This is the haunting legacy of Guzzlord, Ube 5, the gluttonous void, a creature that doesn't just consume food or energy, it consumes space itself. Its mouth is a wound in reality, perpetually open, pulling matter into a digestive system that has no end, no waste, no satiety, just hunger, eternal and mindless. And the Ultra Ruin is what happens when that hunger is left unchecked for years. So where did the people go? The ones who stayed behind when the first Ultra Wormhole tore open over this city. Why didn't they flee? The tragic answer is that they couldn't. Not all of them, anyway. When the Alola of this timeline began to tear apart, when the first Guzzlord emerged from a crack in the sky, many residents tried to evacuate, but the wormholes were unstable, closing and reopening at random. Some escapes succeeded, many did not, and those who remained, the sick, the elderly, the stubborn, they hid. They built shelters in basements and subways, hoping the beast would move on. It never did. You can walk through the ruins today and find remnants of their lives. A child's shoe half melted into the asphalt, a photograph faded and curling at the edges of a family standing on a beach that no longer exists, a radio that crackles with nothing but static. These are the artifacts of a quiet apocalypse, not a war with explosions and marching armies, but a slow, grinding consumption. Guzzlord doesn't fight, it feeds, and it doesn't stop feeding until there is nothing left to eat. This is where Guzzlord becomes a mirror held up to human negligence, because the Ultra Ruin wasn't caused by some malicious invader bent on destruction. It was caused by indifference. The people here didn't leave because they thought the beast was a myth. The scientists dismissed the early wormhole readings as equipment errors. The government was slow to act, more concerned with image than reality. Sound familiar? It's the same inertia that lets invasive species spread, that lets pollution choke the oceans, that lets climate change creep up until it's too late. Guzzlord is not a monster from another dimension. It's the consequence of ignoring the signs given form. And now, the silence that fills this city is not peaceful. It is the silence of a held breath, the silence of something waiting, because Guzzlord may have moved on, but the Ultra Ruin is not empty. In the shadows between collapsed skyscrapers, in the tunnels beneath the plaza, there are echoes. The people who stayed behind, some of them survived in a way. They adapted, they changed. They are still here, hiding, feeding on whatever scraps fall through the wormholes. They are human, but not entirely. Their eyes have that same hollow glint as the moss that covers the walls. They know the beast is still out there, somewhere, and they know it could return at any moment. So the Ultra Ruin stands as a monument to what happens when a world refuses to look at the danger growing in its blind spots. A city of ghosts, kept company by a hunger that knows no limit, and somewhere in the dark, the guardian deities of this broken timeline, if they still exist, must be watching, waiting for the moment when the next wormhole tears open, because the invaders are not done. They never are. We walked through the ruins of an alternate Howley city, a place where the sky had been eaten, where the people chose to stay rather than flee, where Guzzlord's endless hunger had turned a vibrant metropolis into a silent tomb. That was the Ultra Ruin, a future that might have been, a warning written in collapsed buildings and forgotten names. But the Ultra Ruin is not the only scar left on the fabric of Alola. Long before the events of Sun and Moon, before Lucamine opened her selfish wormholes, before the international police even knew what an Ultra Beast was, the islands of Alola had already faced something like this. They had faced it once before, in a time so ancient that history has become myth, and myth has become a quiet prayer on the lips of the guardian deities. The first invasion was not a single event, but a slow creeping tear in reality. The Tapu, The four guardian deities of Melemele, Akala, Ulaula, and Pony Island had long sensed that Alola was different. The islands are not just a chain of volcanic rock and coral, they are a threshold. The dimensional fabric here is thinner than anywhere else in the known Pokémon world. Why? Because Alola sits above a nexus of ultra space energy, a place where the veil between dimensions has always been fragile, like a scar that never fully heals. The ancient ancestors of the Alolan people understood this. They built their societies around the Tapu, who in turn maintained the spiritual equilibrium of the land. The Tapu were not just protectors, they were wardens of a gate that must never be left unguarded. Then the first Ultra Beasts came, not through a machine, not through a cosmog's power, but through natural ruptures in the sky. No one knows what caused those first wormholes. Perhaps a solar flare, perhaps a shift in the cosmic tides, perhaps something older and more malevolent stirring in ultraspace. But the beasts that emerged were not the ones we know today. They were more primal, more alien, their forms less defined. They brought with them an energy that did not belong to Alola. And when foreign energy enters an ecosystem that has thrived in isolation for millennia, the spiritual toll is devastating. The Tapu fought. Tapu Koko descended from its shrine on Melemele, lightning crackling along its shell, its eyes burning with anger that was older than any human memory. Tapu Lele scattered scales of psychic force across Akala, trying to heal the wounds that the invaders left on the land itself. Tapu Bulu rooted itself in the forests of Ulaula, its vines coiling like serpents, pushing back the unnatural fog that the Ultra Beasts breathed. And Tapu Fini, the most mysterious of the four, retreated to the waters of Pony Island, where it wove a mist so thick that even the invaders could not penetrate it. But the war was not clean. It was not a victory. It was a holding action, a desperate attempt to seal the wounds before the islands bled out entirely. The land remembered, even after the ancient Ultra Beasts were driven back, or perhaps simply retreated. The energy they left behind lingered. It corrupted the soil in places, twisted the plants, altered the behavior of native Pokémon. The Tapu absorbed as much of that taint as they could, but they could not erase it entirely. That is why, generations later, when a new wave of Ultra Beasts emerged, the Tapu were ready, not eager, but ready. They had seen this before. They knew that Alola's thin dimensional skin would always attract those from beyond, and they knew that every invasion, every breach, every stray piece of ultra space that seeped into their world would exact a spiritual cost. The battle between the guardian deities and the invaders is not a story of good versus evil. It is a story of incompatible realities colliding. The Tapu are not merely gods, they are the immune system of Alola. When a foreign body enters, they react, they attack. But an immune system can become exhausted. It can turn on itself. The spiritual toll on the land is not just about damage to the environment. It is about the exhaustion of the guardians themselves. After the first invasion, the Tapu grew more withdrawn. They stopped interacting with humans as directly. They became legends, distant and feared. And when the next invasion came, the one we witnessed in our own time, they were still scarred from the ancient war. That is why Alola trembled when Lusamine ripped open the sky. The Tapu felt it like a wound reopening. Tapu Koko met Buzzwole over the beach of Melemele, and the clash sent waves of energy that knocked people unconscious for blocks. But this time, something was different. This time, the Ultra Beasts were not just primal forces. They were individuals, each with a purpose, each carrying the imprint of a dimension that had shaped them into something terrible and beautiful. And the Tapu, for all their power, could not stop them alone. They needed help. They needed humans. They needed a bond that had been broken 1,000 years ago. The silence of the Ultra Ruin is still echoing in our minds as we turn back to the present, or what passes for present in a world where dimensions bleed together. The guardian deities faced the invaders not as conquerors, but as martyrs. They gave everything to preserve a balance that was never truly stable. And what of the child that came from ultra space? Not one of the 11 known beasts, but something smaller. Something that should not have existed at all. In the next chapter, we will meet UB Adhesive, a creature born not of war, but of accident, a being that clings to whatever it touches, and that might be the most tragic Ultra Beast of all. The ancient war between the Tapas and the first Ultra Beast invasion left Alola's islands scarred with dimensional scars, thinning the boundary between worlds. But not all Ultra Beasts are monsters of destruction. There is one that calls itself a child, and in its home dimension, it is the closest thing to a partner a human could ever have. UB Adhesive, the creature known as Poipole, defies everything we think we know about the beings from ultra space. Poipole is small, barely a foot tall, with a head shaped like a purple teardrop and two giant expressive eyes. It is also unnervingly intelligent. In Ultra Megalopolis, the city built in the heart of ultra space, Poipole is not a wild beast to be captured. It is a starter Pokémon in the truest sense. The first friend a young Ultra Recon Squad member receives when they come of age. Its surprising intelligence allows it to understand complex commands, solve puzzles, and even communicate through a series of emotional squeaks and gestures. In its own world, Pole is cherished as a loyal companion, a symbol of trust between humans and the creatures of ultra space. But the tragedy of Poipole lies in how it is used. The Ultra Recon Squad, the organization of explorers from Ultra Megalopolis, face a terrible crisis. Their world is being drained of light by Necrozma, a legendary Pokémon that has plunged them into eternal darkness. Desperate to restore their sun, the Ultra Recon Squad trains Poipole not as a partner, but as a weapon. They teach it to absorb and store energy, to poison and sting, to become a living tool for their mission. The child of ultra space becomes a soldier, and it does so willingly, because it loves its trainer. That is the heartbreak. Poipole is intelligent enough to understand sacrifice, and it gives itself to a cause it barely comprehends. The evolutionary trigger of Poipole is tied to one specific move, Dragon Pulse. In its base form, Poipole is a pure poison type, but when it masters the draconic energy of a Dragon Pulse, a transformation begins. The head splits open, revealing a long serpentine body with wings of poison and a stinger dripping with venom. Naganadel is born, a poison dragon type that soars through the air like a living missile. This evolution is not just a physical change, it is a rite of passage. In Ultra Megalopolis, a Poipole that evolves into Naganadel has proven its strength and its bond, but for the Ultra Recon Squad, it is merely the final stage of their weapon. The birth of Naganadel is both beautiful and tragic. Its wings shimmer with toxic light, and its eyes burn with an intelligence that now understands the weight of the battles it will fight. It is no longer a child, it is a creature designed for war, and the Ultra Recon Squad's desperation drives them forward, pushing their partners to evolve, to fight, to die if necessary. The child of ultra space never asked for this destiny, but it accepts it out of loyalty. And as we prepare to uncover the full depth of that desperation in the next chapter, we must ask ourselves, what kind of world forces its children to become monsters? We left Poipole in a strange place, creature raised as a weapon, handed to children as a starter, yet capable of emotion so deep that it can bond with a trainer from another dimension. But the Ultra Recon Squad does not see Poipole as a pet or a partner. They see it as a tool for survival, and that survival has a desperate, almost crushing urgency, because the world they come from is dying. Not slowly, not gradually, but with the finality of a star that has already gone dark. Living in a world without light is not a metaphor for the Ultra Recon Squad. It is a literal, physical reality. Their home dimension, Ultra Megalopolis, exists in perpetual twilight, a city built into a vast cavern where the sky is not sky but stone. No sun rises there, no moon waxes and wanes. The only illumination comes from artificial sources, flickering neon, and the bioluminescence of the creatures they share their space with. And those creatures, the Ultra Beasts, are not just neighbours, they are predators. They are chaos given flesh. The Ultra Recon Squad's entire existence is a technological struggle to contain the beasts they live alongside, to keep them from devouring what little remains of their civilization. Think about that for a moment. Imagine trying to build a society when the walls of your city are constantly under siege by creatures that can tear through steel like paper. Imagine raising children in a world where the only source of warmth is the heat from a machine that barely manages to keep the darkness at bay. This is the reality of Ultra Megalopolis, and it has shaped the Ultra Recon Squad into something more than explorers or scientists. They are refugees with a mission, and that mission has driven them to a moral precipice. Their quest is to steal Alola's sun, not metaphorically. They want to take the light itself. They have studied the legends of Solgaleo and Lunala, of the light that pulses through the Alola region, and they believe that if they can harness that light, they can bring it back to their world. They can save their people. But to do that, they must capture a creature that is not just powerful but sacred, and they are willing to use any means necessary, including the very beasts they struggle to contain. The moral ambiguity of a civilization trying to survive at any cost is not a philosophical exercise for them. It is a daily calculation. When Dulce, Zossi, and their fellow squad members look at Poipole, they see a weapon. When they look at Nihilego, they see a tool. When they look at Guzzlord, they see a resource to be harvested. They have learned to treat these creatures as objects, because the alternative, acknowledging them as equals, as beings with their own wills, would make their survival impossible. You cannot negotiate with a Guzzlord. You cannot reason with a Buzzwole, but you can weaponize them. You can aim them at your enemies. And in the Ultra Recon Squad's mind, the only enemy that matters is the darkness. This is why they approach the player character, the champion of Alola, with such earnestness. They are not villains in the traditional sense. They do not laugh maniacally or scheme for power. They are polite. They are grateful. They explain their situation with a kind of desperate hope that is almost heartbreaking. They ask for help, not because they want to conquer, but because they have run out of options. And when they are finally forced to confront the champion, to fight for the right to take the light, there is no malice in their eyes, only exhaustion, only the weight of a world that will never see the sun. But their plan is flawed. The light they seek is not a battery to be stored. It is a living creature, a being of immense consciousness that is tied to the very fabric of Alola's dimension. To steal that light would be to disrupt an ecosystem far more complex than they understand. And yet, what choice do they have? Would you not do the same if your family were freezing in the dark? If your children were born into a world where the only colour was the grey of stone? The Ultra Recon Squad's desperation is the thread that binds all Ultra Beast lore together. It explains why the wormholes keep opening. It explains why the beasts keep coming. They are not invaders in the way we think of invaders. They are survivors pushed out of their own homes by forces beyond their control. And the squad itself is a mirror of that survival instinct. A group of people who have become as alien as the creatures they study. In their facility, deep within the Ether Paradise, there is a room filled with screens showing data from the other side. They monitor the Ultra Beasts constantly, tracking their movements, their feeding patterns, their breeding cycles. They have learned to predict when a beast will become agitated, when it will lash out, and they have developed technology to pacify them. Not through kindness, but through control. The Beast Ball is one such device. The containment fields are another, but every new invention comes at a cost. Every success is paid for in failure somewhere else. They have lost people to the beasts. They have lost friends, and yet they continue, because stopping means death for everyone they have ever known. So when they come to Alola, offering friendship, offering knowledge, they are not lying. They genuinely believe that what they are doing is right. The tragedy is that they are not wrong to believe it. They are simply so trapped in their own desperation that they cannot see the harm they are about to cause, and that is what makes them so compelling and so sad. Now, as we prepare to step into the next chapter, we will meet a beast that embodies this conflict in a way that no other Ultra Beast can. A creature that is not just a predator, but a watcher, an entity that sees everything and judges nothing, but whose presence alone is enough to drive a person to madness. We're about to encounter UB6, the Wall of Eyes. The Ultra Recon Squad's desperation hangs in the air like a lingering silence. It came from a world without light, a place where even the concept of a sun had become a distant memory, and so they reached across dimensions, hoping to steal Alola's star for themselves. Their methods were cold, their morality murky, yet you could almost understand the weight of their choice. But now we must turn our gaze to a different kind of silent horror, one that does not hunt, does not scheme, does not plead. It simply stands and watches. There is a creature that looks less like a living thing and more like a fortress. It is a towering wall of dark stone and jagged edges, a formation that seems carved by some ancient, unknowable hand. Its name is Stakataka, and it's classified as UB6, the Wall of Eyes, but that name only scratches the surface of what it truly is. When you first see Stakataka, your mind tries to categorize it as a structure, a thing, a monument, but that instinct is a dangerous mistake, because what appears to be a single entity is actually hundreds of individual beings, stacked and interlocked into a single, moving edifice. Stakataka's nature as a colonial organism made of hundreds of individuals is not just a biological curiosity, it is the key to everything this creature is. Each unit is about the size of a small boulder, shaped like a perfect brick, and every brick possesses its own rudimentary consciousness. They do not think as one, they think as many, negotiating every motion, every decision, through a silent networked communication that we can only guess at. And this is where the true, chilling detail emerges. On the front face of each of those bricks sits a single, unblinking eye, not a painted symbol, not a decorative pattern, but a genuine, sentient, watching eye. The eerie realization that every brick is a sentient, watching eye is not just a detail of its design, it is the core of its being. Imagine that wall turned toward you. Not a monster with 2 eyes, but 1,000 eyes, all fixed on you at once, each one seeing you from a slightly different angle. They do not blink in unison. They do not look away. They simply observe, waiting, processing. It is a gaze that feels less like a predator sizing up its prey, and more like a silent judgment recorded by an unmoving assembly. How does such a creature move? How does it coordinate its many parts? The truth is, Stakataka does not walk the way we do. It shifts. The bricks slide against one another, rearranging their positions like a living puzzle. When it wants to turn, the entire stack rotates from within, each individual unit adjusting its footing in a wave of small movements. It can reassemble itself into different shapes, though it typically keeps its towering wall form, because that offers the best view of its surroundings and the best vantage for those countless eyes. But here is where the horror deepens when Stakataka's world meets ours. On its home dimension, the gravitational pull is far stronger than anything we experience on Earth. Its body evolved in that crushing weight, each brick perfectly engineered to withstand pressures that would flatten steel. So when Stakataka enters our world, where gravity is comparatively weak, something unexpected happens. Its structural integrity is challenged by our gravity, but not in the way you might think. Instead of collapsing under too much weight, it begins to feel as though its body is too light. The familiar pressure that once held it together, that gave it a sense of stability and certainty, is gone. And in that unsettling lightness, the colony becomes uneasy. When a Stakataka's structural integrity is challenged by our gravity, it reacts by contracting. The bricks press against each other with increased force, trying to compensate for the lack of external density. It clamps down, tightening its form, building internal pressure, as if trying to recreate the heaviness of its lost home. This is not aggression, it is a survival instinct. But the result is that Stakataka becomes even more impenetrable, more immovable. It hunkers down, waiting for gravity to return to normal, waiting for the world to make sense again. And all the while, those eyes do not stop watching. Some researchers have theorized that Stakataka's true purpose is not to attack or defend, but to observe. That its colony mind is trying to understand our dimension, to catalogue every detail of this strange, light-filled, low-gravity world. Is it a scout, an explorer, or simply a lost civilization of small individual consciousnesses that fused together long ago as a survival strategy, and now cannot unmake themselves? We may never know. What we do know is that when you stand before the wall of eyes, you are standing before a living monument of coexistence. Hundreds of minds, each with its own tiny spark of will, united in a single purpose: to endure, to watch, and to wait. And while Stakataka stands motionless in silent observation, another Ultra Beast is preparing to paint the sky in devastation, a being whose entire existence is built on explosive release and furious transformation. The next chapter will reveal a creature that turns destruction into art, chaos into ritual, and fire into meaning. We are about to meet UB7, the fireworks of destruction. I hope you're as amazed by this as I am. If you want to stay updated on more content like this, make sure to subscribe and join our community of curious minds. Trust me, what's coming next will challenge everything you thought you knew. Chapter 20. UB7, the fireworks of destruction. We ended the last chapter surrounded by a wall of eyes, each brick of Stakana a living, watching individual. That collective consciousness, that silent, immovable fortress, stands in stark contrast to what we now turn to. Because if Stakataka is the patient, unblinking sentinel of ultraspace, then Blacephalon is the manic, laughing jester who dances at the edge of reason. It is the seventh of the original seven, the one whose existence feels less like a creature of nature and more like a fever dream given form. And unlike the stone-still Stakataka, Blacephalon is restless, volatile, and capable of something utterly terrifying. It can detonate its own head. Let that sink in for a moment. This is not a metaphor. Blacephalon possesses the mind-bending ability to trigger a violent, explosive detonation of its own cranium. Its head, a spherical, brilliant white orb that resembles a stylized clown's cap or a firework shell, can be ignited at will, producing a blinding flash and a shockwave that rips through the air. But here is the truly disturbing part. The explosion does not kill it. The head is not a vital organ in the way we understand. It is more like a disposable weapon, a biological grenade that Blacephalon can regenerate almost instantly. When the blast subsides, a new head simply materializes, as if the creature had merely been playing a game of peekaboo with reality. It laughs, it detonates, it reforms, and it laughs again. The cycle is endless. But why would any creature evolve such a self-destructive mechanism? The answer lies in its predatory nature. Blacephalon is not a mindless destroyer. It is a cunning, patient hunter, and its primary method of killing is one of the most bizarre in all of ultraspace. It relies on surprise. It relies on the element of shock. In its home dimension, where the laws of physics might be more fluid, Blacephalon stalks prey by appearing harmless, almost playful. It presents itself as a colourful, dancing spectacle, a grinning piñata of light, and when a victim draws close, mesmerised by the display, Blacephalon moves with incredible speed, lunging at the creature and pressing its own head against the target. Then in a flash of raging energy, it detonates. The explosion is the trap snapping shut. The blast itself does the work, disorienting, injuring, or outright killing the victim. In that instant of chaos, Blacephalon feeds. It steals life force, siphoning the energy from the stunned or dying prey. Like a parasite of pure kinetic force, the victim never sees the punchline coming. It is a clown that tells a joke, and the punchline is annihilation. This is why its appearance is so deceptive, and why I said its colourful form is the ultimate lure for unsuspecting victims. Blacephalon's body is a prism of neon hues, fiery reds, electric yellows, deep blues, all wrapped in a sleek, almost rubbery hide. It has long, thin limbs that end in glowing, bulbous tips, and a face that is perpetually frozen in a wide, manic grin. It looks like something from a carnival, a living firework that has come to life. And that is exactly the point. In any environment, whether the alien landscapes of ultraspace or the familiar forests of Alola, Blacephalon stands out. It is impossible to ignore. Its very presence demands attention, and that attention is the bait. A being of pure, unrestrained spectacle, it dances, it sparkles, it glows, and you cannot help but watch. You want to see what it does next. And that curiosity is what seals your fate. It is a predator that understands the psychology of wonder and weaponizes it. When the Ultra Beasts first began appearing across Alola, Blacephalon was among the rarest and most feared. Witnesses described seeing a flash of light in the distance, followed by a loud bang, and then nothing but a faint chemical smell lingering in the air. Entire patches of forest would be found scorched, with no sign of what caused the blast. The international police had difficulty even tracking it, because Blacephalon does not leave a typical trail. It leaves craters. It leaves laughter. It leaves the unsettling feeling that something beautiful can kill you without warning, and that is the darkest secret of this creature. It does not hate you. It does not view you as an enemy. It views you as an audience, and it will do anything to get a reaction. To stand before Blacephalon is to confront a fundamental paradox. It is both a destroyer and a performer. It is a being of pure chaotic joy that is also a cold, calculating predator. Every explosion is a punchline. Every new head is a curtain call. And you, the viewer, are the straight man in a comedy that ends in flames. It makes you wonder, in that dark, quiet moment before sleep takes you, what other creatures lurk in the space between dimensions, and whether their strange behaviors are not madness, but simply a form of communication we are too slow to understand. What if Blacephalon is not trying to kill us, but trying to make us laugh, and the explosion is the only punchline it knows? As we move deeper into the mysteries of ultra space, we are about to encounter something that is not an ultra beast at all, but is often mistaken for one, a being of such terrible light that its arrival rewrote the history of an entire dimension. Next, we will explore the Necrozma anomaly. And so, Blacephalon's self-destruction was not an act of malice, but a desperate, lonely trick. A final brilliant performance in a world where it was never meant to belong. Yet, in the same ultraspace that gave us these dancing flames, there lurks a being so alien, so broken, that it was once mistaken for an ultra beast itself. I speak, of course, of Necrozma, the prism Pokémon, the light that fell, the shattered god whose pain rewrote the history of an entire region. You see, when the international police first detected Necrozma emerging from an Ultra Wormhole in the Alola region, their tracking equipment registered it as an Ultra Beast. They even gave it a codename, Black. But this classification was a mistake, born from the same confusion that once labelled Solgaleo and Lunala as Ultra Beasts. Necrozma lacks the signature ability that defines true Ultra Beasts, Beast Boost. It does not appear on the same interdimensional frequency, and yet the confusion is understandable, because Necrozma is not a creature from our dimension. It is a visitor from a realm beyond ultraspace, a being of pure light that has been shattered into pieces, and its agonizing journey is one of the darkest secrets in the Pokémon universe. The ancient history of Necrozma is a story of theft and despair. Long before the Alola region had its first settlers, Necrozma descended from the stars as a radiant entity, a source of boundless light that illuminated entire worlds. It was worshipped as a god, but in its home dimension, something catastrophic happened. A group of beings, perhaps early humans, perhaps other creatures, envied Necrozma's power. They stole its light. They stole the Zeg crystals, the fragments of its very essence, and used them to fuel their own ambitions. In the process, they shattered Necrozma into pieces. The once glorious being was reduced to a dark, skeletal form, forever hungry for the light that was ripped from its body, and so it wanders the cosmos, driven by a pain that no mortal can comprehend. When Necrozma emerged in Alola, it was not to invade or conquer, it was to reclaim what was stolen. It sought the light of Solgaleo and Lunala, the very same Z-crystal energy that had been torn from its core. This is why it attacks them, why it fuses with them into terrifying forms like Dusk Mane and Dawn Wings. It is not malevolence but desperation, a god trying to piece itself back together. The agonizing pain of Necrozma is not just physical, it is existential. Imagine being a being of pure illumination, then having your light torn out, leaving you as a hollow, ravenous shell. Every moment is an ache, a hunger that can never be fully satisfied. This is why Necrozma's power is so overwhelming when it finally reclaims its true form in Ultra Necrozma. It is a brief, glorious and terrifying glimpse of the full god it once was. And then just as quickly, it fades back into darkness. The dark history of the light that fell is a cautionary tale about greed. The theft of the sea crystals was not just a crime against a single being, it destabilized an entire dimension. Without Necrozma's light, the Ultra Megalopolis, the world of the Ultra Recon Squad, fell into perpetual twilight. They became desperate, willing to steal the light of other worlds, which is what brought them to Alola. The cycle of theft and suffering began with Necrozma's shattering. Now, as we consider the pain of a god, we must also remember that Necrozma is still out there, drifting through the void between dimensions. It was eventually captured, studied, but never truly healed. Its agony remains. And somewhere, far beyond the range of our telescopes, there may be other fragments, other pieces of that original light, waiting to be found. But before you drift off to sleep with that image of a broken prism god, let me leave you with one final thought. Necrozma's story does not end here. There is another realm, deeper and darker than even Ultra Space, where the world is not just without light, it is without air, without ground, an endless abyss of pressure and silence. In our next chapter, we will descend into that mysterious place. We will explore the Ultra Deep Sea, so rest easy, knowing that even the darkest secrets are merely steps on a journey of wonder. Good night. What do you do when you realize the monster you've been fighting was never the true enemy? When you peel back the layers of a nightmare and find something far older, far quieter, and far more patient waiting beneath? That's the question that emerges from the wreckage of the Necrozma anomaly. A being so fractured and agonized that its very light was a cry for help. But while Necrozma was a shattered god, there is another creature that doesn't scream, it doesn't shine, it drifts. And its home is a place where even the concept of sound has been stolen away. We need to go deeper now, past the dimensions of burning light and endless jungle, past the worlds where every breath is a fight for survival. We need to sink into the Ultra Deep Sea, the home of Nihilego, the first Ultra Beast ever encountered. And the first thing you need to understand is that this place isn't truly a sea. It's a dimension that feels like one, an endless, dark expanse of something that isn't water, but presses against you with the same gentle, insistent weight. There's no current, no tide, no surface to break through. Just a vast, silent, slow-moving eternity of liquid shadow. The very first time anyone from our world entered that dimension and survived to tell about it, they described a hypnotic, rhythmic silence. Not an absence of noise, but a presence of something so deep and so slow that your own heartbeat becomes the loudest thing in the universe. Your breathing echoes back at you from walls you cannot see, and somewhere ahead, in that endless dusk, there are shapes, dozens, hundreds, thousands. They don't move like animals. They sway, they pulse, they wait. This is the birthplace of Nihilego, and we came to understand that creature all wrong. When we first met Nihilego on Earth, it appeared as a single, beautiful, dangerous jellyfish-like entity. We watched it latch onto President Lusamine, pierce her mind with that diamond-hard proboscis, and twist her personality until she became a hollow shell of obsession. We called it a parasite. We called it an invader. We assumed that its attack on Lusamine was a targeted strike, a deliberate choice to corrupt the leader of Ether Paradise and use her as a puppet to open the Ultra Wormholes. But the truth is far more chilling. Nihilego doesn't choose its hosts because they are special. It doesn't care about political power or scientific knowledge. It doesn't even understand the concept of a president. What Nihilego seeks is simply a living body with a nervous system it can colonize, and Lusamine was just one of many potential hosts. She was convenient. She was there. But in the ultra deep sea, there are countless others. You have to imagine this dimension as a kind of nursery, a breeding ground for an entire species of parasites that have existed for longer than any civilization on any known world. They don't reproduce like normal creatures. They bud, they split, they drift apart and become new individuals, each one identical in purpose, each one searching for a warm vessel to inhabit. The water, if you can call it that, is thick with them. They hang in the darkness like ghostly lanterns, their translucent bells pulsing with a faint bioluminescence that never reaches true brightness. It's always dim, always twilight, always just enough light to see the next shape, and the next, and the next. A journey into Nihilego's homeworld reveals the sheer number of parasites. It's not a lone predator, it's a diaspora, a floating cloud of minds that have never needed to evolve intelligence. Because they don't hunt with cunning, they hunt with patience. They drift toward any sign of life, and when they find it, they attach. And the host never even knows it's happening till it's too late. Remember how Lusamine changed? The coldness, the obsession, the way she abandoned her children and her humanity for the sake of opening wormholes. That wasn't just her own ambition warped by the parasite. That was Nihilego's influence rewriting her neural pathways. But the parasite doesn't destroy the host's personality outright. It nudges. It turns up the volume on existing desires. If you love power, it makes you crave absolute control. If you love knowledge, it makes you burn away everything else in pursuit of a single answer. And if you love your children, it twists that love into a need to possess them, to make them part of yourself so they can never leave. But here's the horror that the Alola region never fully faced. Lusamine was not the first, and she certainly was not the last. The ultra deep sea has seen countless species come through its wormholes over the eons. There are fossils of long-dead civilizations embedded in the sediment of that place, remains of creatures that wandered into the wrong dimension and met a Nihilego swarm. Their bones are not broken, they are hollowed out. The parasites draw out every drop of life force, every memory, every spark of identity, and then they move on, leaving behind a husk that still twitches with residual nerve impulses. The sea itself remembers. That rhythmic silence isn't empty. It's the sound of billions of tiny synaptic echoes, the ghost signals of every creature that has ever been absorbed. They whisper in frequencies too low for human ears. But if you could hear them, you would hear Lusamine's voice in there, and Moan's, and 1,000 others you've never met. Mon, the husband of Lusamine, the father of Lily and Gladion, the original Ether Foundation researcher. He was the first known contact. He fell into an ultra wormhole while studying the creatures, and the last anyone saw of him, he was vanishing into a rift. Most people assumed he died, but the Ultra Recon Squad, the team from the Ultra Megalopolis, they know better. They've seen what happens to people who wander into Nihilego's domain. They don't die, they change. Their bodies become vessels, and their minds are slowly dissolved, like sugar in warm water, until nothing remains but the shape of a person with something else looking out through their eyes. The true terror of Nihilego is not that it kills you, it's that it keeps you alive long enough to use you. The host body continues to function, the voice still speaks, the hands still move, but the person you were is gone, replaced by a puppet driven by the parasite's single imperative: find more hosts, open more doors, bring more of the swarm through, and the swarm is endless. Standing in the ultra deep sea, you would see them as far as you could see, not moving fast, just swaying, drifting, patiently waiting for the next wormhole to tear open, the next flood of warmth and electricity, and life to pour in from the world above. But there is a strange beauty to that place too. The scientists who have attempted to study it, those few who dared to enter and return, describe the sea as hypnotic. the way the parasites glow, the way the water, or whatever it is, moves so slowly that you forget time exists. The silence becomes a kind of lullaby. The pressure becomes a weight that holds you still. And if you stay too long, you start to feel like you belong there, like you always belonged there, like the sea has been waiting for you. That is the trap. The dimension itself is the first predator. The Nihilego adjusts its teeth. When Lucamine was finally freed from the parasite's control, she was broken in a way that went beyond trauma. She spoke of the sea as if it had become part of her. She remembered the silence. She remembered the lights. And she remembered the feeling of being one host among many, floating in a crowd of hollowed-out bodies, all of them swaying in the same rhythm, all of them waiting for the next warm body to fall through the sky. That is what the ultra deep sea truly is, a waiting room. And every ultra beast that has ever crossed into our world is a signal, a call, a reminder that the door is still open and the swarm is still hungry. But some doors should stay closed, and some places are better left unexplored, because once you have heard that silence, once you have felt that pressure, you carry it with you forever. It lives in your bones, just beneath the skin, waiting for the moment when you are weak enough, tired enough, or desperate enough to let it back in. And that is the quiet horror of Nihilego's home world. It doesn't invade, it waits. It doesn't force, it invites. And when you finally step through that wormhole, you understand that you were never the explorer. You were the prey that came willingly. The next chapter in this story is not about the parasites themselves, but about what happens to the people who survive their touch. Because Lucamine was freed, but she was not healed. And the scars left behind by an ultra beast are not just on the body, they reach into the very fabric of reality itself. They twist time, memory and identity into something that the international police call the Phala syndrome. And if you think the deep sea was terrifying, you have not yet seen what it does to a person who has been pulled inside out by They were never meant to understand. The creatures that came through the Ultra Wormholes did not arrive alone. They brought something with them. Not a physical thing you could hold or see, but a residue, a scent. It clings to the air of ultra space, thick and unplaceable, like ozone after a storm mixed with the quiet decay of a world that was never meant to support life as we know it. And when a human crosses that threshold, even for just a moment, that scent soaks into them. It becomes part of their chemistry, their aura, their very being. The ultra beasts can smell it, and they are drawn to it the way a moth is drawn to a flame, not out of malice, but out of something far more primal. They are following a signal they cannot ignore. This is the foundation of what the international police and the Ether Foundation have come to call the Phala syndrome. It is not a disease in the traditional sense. You cannot catch it, you cannot cure it, and you cannot hide from it once it has taken hold. A Phala is anyone who has passed through an ultra wormhole and returned to our world. The moment you step into that impossible space between dimensions, something rewires you. Neurons that were never meant to fire begin to spark. Pathways that connect memory, emotion, and perception become crossed. The result is permanent, and it is tragic. The first and most obvious change is the scent. It is not a literal smell detectable by human noses, but ultra beasts perceive it with perfect clarity. To them, a Phala glows like a beacon in a dark room. This is why certain individuals become magnets for ultra beast attacks, why they seem to draw these creatures out of nowhere. The beasts are not hunting them, they are following a homing signal, and once a Phala has been marked, there is no way to scrub that scent away. It lingers in their skin, their breath, their sweat. Even years later, returning to a completely normal life is impossible because the beasts will always find them. The only way to escape is to never come back, but that means leaving behind everyone and everything you have ever known. The deeper changes are neurological. The human brain was never designed to process the fabric of ultraspace. When you travel through a wormhole, you are exposed to energies and perceptions that simply do not exist in our reality. The brain responds by building new connections, reorganizing itself to try to make sense of what it experienced. But in doing so, it sacrifices older, more stable structures. Memories begin to blur. The edges between real and unreal soften. Some followers report seeing things out of the corner of their eye that are not there. Others develop a strange kind of synesthesia, where they can hear colors or taste sounds. And many lose whole chunks of their past, as if the brain had to delete old files to make room for the impossible data it now holds. Perhaps the most heartbreaking case of the Phala syndrome is that of Annabelle. She was once a member of the Battle Frontier in the Hoenn region, a woman with a calm, analytical mind and a gift for reading opponents. But she was also a frontier brain who encountered an Ultra Beast during the events that shook Alola. She crossed into Ultra Space and came back, but she did not come back whole. When she returned, her memories of Hoenn were gone, not just faded or confused, but completely erased. She could not recall the Battle Frontier. She could not recall the friends she had made, the battles she had won, the life she had built. The only thing she remembered was the scent. She remembered the cold, silent weight of Ultra Space, and she remembered the feeling of being followed. Annabelle became a ghost in her own body. She wandered Alola not as a visitor, but as a refugee from her own mind. The international police took her in, studied her, tried to help her rebuild, but the memories of Hoenn were gone, and no amount of therapy or technology could bring them back. She was a Phala, and the price of her passage was everything she had ever known. She could still fight. She could still think. But the person she had been was scattered across dimensions, lost in the same void that now clung to her like a second skin. And this is the truth that the Ether Foundation and the international police have had to accept. The Phala syndrome is not a malfunction, it is an adaptation. The brain rewires itself to survive the exposure to Ultra Space, but in doing so it becomes permanently tuned to a frequency that no human should ever hear. The scent is not a curse, it is a compass, pointing always back to the place that changed you. And the beasts, in their own way, are just following the same signal. They are coming home. But when that home is a human being, the consequences are devastating. Phalas become living doors. They attract ultra beasts wherever they go, endangering entire communities. And they themselves are trapped between worlds, unable to fully return and unable to fully leave. The only mercy is that most Phalas do not remember the crossing itself. The brain, in its desperate attempt to protect itself, often deletes the moment of transit, but the scent remains. The neurological changes remain, and the beasts will keep coming. This is why the Ultra Recon Squad treated their missions with such urgency. They knew that every human who fell into an Ultra Wormhole would bring the beasts back with them. They knew that the scent would spread, that the chaos would escalate, and they knew that some Phalas, like Annabelle, would lose everything they were. The syndrome is not a punishment. It is a side effect of being touched by something that was never meant to touch us, which raises a dark question. If the scent of Ultra Space can draw beasts across dimensions, what happens when a human already marked continues to cross back and forth? What happens when the wormholes are not sealed, but forced open again and again? The answer lies not in the mind of a single Phala, but in the ecological damage that follows in their wake. Because when a creature from another dimension arrives in our world, it does not just arrive alone. It brings its entire ecosystem with it, invisible, hungry and unstoppable. You think you understand the scent of Ultra Space, the way it clings to a Phala's skin, like something ancient and hungry. But what happens when that scent becomes a signal, when entire ecosystems start to echo with it, and the creatures that follow aren't just one or two lost travelers, but a tide? That is the moment Alola stopped being a tropical paradise and became a laboratory for ecological collapse. And the invaders, they weren't Pokémon in any sense we understood. They were exactly what the international police's classified reports began calling them: Ultra Beasts. Let me tell you about lionfish. In the Atlantic, off the coast of Florida and the Caribbean, lionfish are a textbook invasive species. They have no natural predators in those waters. They reproduce faster than local fish can adapt. They eat everything: juvenile grouper, snapper, shrimp, the tiny cleaners that keep reefs healthy. Within a few years of an invasion, native fish populations can drop by 80%. The reef becomes a ghost. Now imagine that same process. But the lionfish can grow stronger every time it kills something. Imagine that it doesn't just eat its prey. It absorbs the very energy, the potential, life force of everything it consumes. That is the Ultra Beast invasion of Alola, and the mechanism behind it is called Beast Boost. Every Ultra Beast carries this ability. When it defeats another creature, a Pokémon, a human, anything with biological energy, it instinctively channels that victory into a permanent increase in its own power. The beast that was already too strong becomes stronger. The invader that already had no natural predators gains even more speed, more offense, more resilience. In the real world, invasive species like lionfish or the brown tree snake on Guam cause damage through sheer numbers and lack of checks. But an Ultra Beast does not wait for numbers. It builds power exponentially. Each kill makes the next kill easier, more devastating. And because these creatures come from dimensions with fundamentally different physical laws, Alola's native life has no evolutionary defense against them. Consider the Alolan ecosystem before the wormholes opened. It was a delicate balance maintained by the guardian deities. Tapu Koko, Tapu Lele, Tapu Bulu, Tapu Fini, each watching over an island. The food chain was old, stable, built over millennia. The predators at the top, like the wild salamence or the occasional legendary, kept things in check. But when Ultra Beasts began emerging from the wormholes that Lusamine tore open across the islands, that balance didn't just tip, it shattered. Imagine a single Buzzwole arriving on Melemele Island. It doesn't need to eat in the same way we think of eating. It absorbs energy directly from living things. A flock of Pikipek, a herd of Mudbray, a sleeping Snorlax come fuel, and every time it drains one, Beast Boost triggers. Its muscles swell with new power. Its already absurd physical strength multiplies. Soon it can punch through volcanic rock. It can shrug off attacks that would level a building. And the guardian Tapu Koko, for all its electric fury, is fighting something that literally becomes more dangerous the longer the fight lasts. Now multiply that across multiple Ultra Beasts, each with its own feeding strategy. Nihilego doesn't drain life force directly. It injects neurotoxins that liquefy a victim's will, then uses the host body as a puppet to attack other creatures. Each host consumed makes Nihilego's poison more potent, faster acting. Circuitry doesn't even need to fight. It plugs into the electronic infrastructure of Alola's towns, draining power stations, causing blackouts, and the energy it absorbs boosts its already terrifying electrical output. A single circuitry can discharge 1,000,000 volts, but after feeding on a city grid for an hour, that number climbs. The total collapse of the Alolan food chain was not a slow wither, it was a cascade. Within days of the major wormhole openings, the native Pokémon on Pony Island began fleeing into the ocean or deeper into caves, but there was nowhere safe. Pheromosa, the Ubtu beauty, moved faster than any natural predator could track, and its sheer speed meant it could strip an area of smaller prey in minutes. Blacephalon, with its explosive head, didn't feed so much as detonate the life out of entire flocks, and each explosion made the next blast bigger. The international police reports from the time describe a region in ecological freefall. The guardian deities went on constant alert. Tapu Fini began shrouding entire coastal areas in mist, trying to confuse the senses of the invaders. But Beast Boost does not rely on sight. It relies on contact, on victory. Even when the Tapas managed to drive a beast back through a wormhole, the damage was done. The soil was poisoned by Nihilego's secretions. The electrical grid was unstable. Whole populations of native species had been reduced by over half. And here is the terror that keeps ecologists and Pokémon professors awake at night. The Ultra Beasts were not even trying to colonize Alola. They were not settling. They were not building nests or establishing territories. They were simply passing through, hunting, feeding, growing. Invasive species in our world take generations to reshape an environment. Lionfish have been in the Atlantic for decades, but an ultra beast can reshape a food chain in a single feeding frenzy. And every successful hunt makes the next generation of invaders, if they ever reproduce, completely unstoppable. That is why the Aether Foundation rushed the Beast Ball project. That is why they created Type, Null and Silverly, not as pets, but as weapons designed to kill beasts before they could snowball. Because once a beast-boosted Ultra Beast reaches a certain threshold, no natural force on the planet can match it. And in the final hours of the Alolan invasion, that threshold was about to be crossed, not on Melemele, not on Akala, but on the most ancient, most isolated island of all. The place where the deepest wormhole had been torn open, where the guardian deities themselves were beginning to fail, and where one creature was about to rewrite the definition of invasive. That story, the event that nearly erased an entire island from the map, is what we will sit with next. On Pony Island, the convergence was not just coming, it had already begun. The previous chapter drew a chilling parallel between the collapse of Alola's ecosystem and the real-world devastation caused by invasive species like the lionfish. But what happens when the invaders do not simply disrupt a food chain, but fundamentally rewrite the rules of reality itself? That is the question that chokes the air of Pony Island as the crisis reaches its breaking point. By the time the mass of Ultra Beasts began to converge, Alola had already been torn apart by a series of escalating emergencies. Nihilego had wormed its way into the heart of the Aether Foundation, controlling Lusamine from within. Buzzwole and Pheromosa had clashed with Tapu Koko on Melemele, leaving scorch marks on the sand. Yet all these incidents were mere tremors before the quake. The true epicenter was Pony Island, and at its core stood the Aura of the Sun and the Aura of the Moon. Twin stone monoliths that had, for centuries, been little more than ancient landmarks. Now they revealed their terrifying purpose. These altars are not simply ruins. They are cosmic antennae, attuned to the frequencies of ultraspace. When Lusamine used the power of Nebi, the cosmog she had stolen, to force open a permanent Ultra Wormhole above the altar of the sun, the stone structure began to resonate like a tuning fork struck by a god. The altar does not merely open a door, it acts as a lightning rod for dimensional energy, drawing Ultra Beasts from across the multiverse as if they were iron filings to a magnet. The more the wormhole pulsed, the more the beasts responded. They did not come in ones or twos. They came in swarms. The climax of the Alolan crisis unfolded on that island, under a sky that bled with unnatural colours. The air crackled with ozone, and the faint metallic scent of another dimension. From the rift above the altar poured forth creatures that defied classification. Nihilego floated like silent jellyfish, their translucent bodies casting no shadow. Buzzwole descended with a thud that shook the ground, flexing muscles that seemed to grow thicker with every heartbeat. A tangle of glowing wires rooted itself into the earth, draining power from the very ground. And then came Pheromosa, sleek and impossibly fast, leaving trails of glittering dust. But these were only the first wave. Behind them, more shapes pressed against the fabric of the wormhole. Pheromosa's mate, perhaps, or something else altogether. The sky was filled not with stars, but with the edges of things that should not be. The people of Alola had no army. They had no specialized weapons beyond the few beast balls that Faber had hastily distributed. What they had were their guardians. The Kahunas, Hala, Olivia, Nanu and Hapu gathered on Pony Island, faces set with grim determination. Beside them stood the trial captains, Ilima, Lana, Kiawe, Mallow, Sophocles and Mina. These were not trained soldiers. They were teenagers and adults who had spent their lives tending to Z-crystals and overseeing island challenges. But now they stood before a dimensional breach, and they had no choice but to defend their home. The defense was desperate and brutal. Tapu Fini, the guardian deity of Pony Island, emerged from the mist, its shell gleaming with the energy of 1,000 years of protection. It did not attack, not at first. Instead, it created a mist of confusion, a veil meant to disorient the beasts, to make them hesitate. But the Ultra Beasts were not native to this dimension. They did not recognize the authority of the Island Guardians. The mist only made them more erratic. Nihilego drifted through the fog, its proboscis searching, yearning for a host. One of the younger trial captains, a boy from Akala, stumbled backward, his zering glowing uselessly. The beast got close, too close. Before Hala stepped in, his hand glowing with the power of a fighting type Z move, he slammed it into the ground, creating a shockwave that scattered the nearest creatures. But for every beast they knocked back, two more emerged. The altar pulsed again, a low hum that vibrated in the bones of every person on the island. The kahunas called out orders, their voices raw. Olivia summoned Lycanroc in its midday form, sending it to Harry, a Buzzwole that was tearing up the ancient stones. Nanu, ever the cynic, simply stood with his hands in his pockets, his Persian at his feet. He did not move until a Xurkitree discharged a bolt of lightning that struck within inches of Mina. Then he moved, faster than seemed possible, and used a Dark-type Z move that swallowed the beast in shadow. For a moment, the creature ceased to exist, but it reappeared moments later, its energy undiminished. The trial captains fought with everything they had. Lana called upon the sea, sending a Wishiwashi in its school form to crash into a Pheromosa, only for the beast to leap over the wave and land behind her. Kiawa's Marowak used a flame charge that set the grass ablaze, but the fire only seemed to attract a Nihilego that absorbed the heat. It was chaos. The defenders were not losing, but they were not winning either. They were simply holding the line, buying seconds, hoping for something, anything, to turn the tide. And then the altar began to glow, not with the soft light of a setting sun or the silver sheen of a full moon. It glowed with a deep, unearthly violet. The wormhole above it began to ripple, and a new figure stepped through. It was not an Ultra Beast. It was a young girl, her skin pale, her eyes distant. She held a fragmented crystal in her hands, and behind her, the sky tore open wider than ever before. The climax of the Alolan crisis had arrived, and it was no longer about defense. It was about survival. The kahunas and trial captains had held the line, but the true nature of the invasion was only beginning to reveal itself. The altar of the sun and moon had done its work. Now the cost of that cosmic broadcast would be measured in lives. The beasts would not stop. They were drawn to something deeper than chaos. They were drawn to energy itself. And in the next chapter, we will explore exactly how that energy feeds into their very biology. The science of Beast Boost is not just a mechanic of battle. It is the key to understanding why these creatures grow stronger with every attack they withstand, and why the desperate defense on Pony Island may have only been a prelude to an even greater horror. The Pony Island convergence was the climax of an invasion that had been building for weeks, yet, even as the last Ultra Wormholes sealed and the beasts were driven back or captured, a deeper mystery lingered in the air itself. The altar of the sun and moon had acted as a cosmic lightning rod, drawing the creatures from ultra space into our dimension with terrifying precision. But why? What was it about that ancient stone structure that resonated so perfectly with the alien energies of the Ultra Beasts? To answer that, we have to look not at the altar, but at the beasts themselves, at the very aura that clings to them like a second skin. Every Ultra Beast is surrounded by a field of energy that originates from ultra space. This is not merely a side effect of their biology, it is the core of their existence. Scientists at the Ether Foundation, after studying captured specimens, began to refer to this phenomenon as the Beast Boost aura. It is a subtle, almost invisible radiation that pulses with the rhythm of a dimension far removed from our own. When a beast enters our world, that aura interacts with the local environment in ways that are both fascinating and deeply unsettling. It does not simply exist passively. It seeks to impose the rules of ultra space onto the fabric of Alola, and nowhere is this more evident than in the reaction of the island's guardian deities and their chosen champions. The totem Pokémon. The totem Pokémon of Alola are not ordinary creatures. They are empowered by the Tapu, the guardian spirits of each island, to watch over specific patches of land known as trial sites. These Pokémon are larger, more aggressive, and possess an aura of their own, a local, natural energy that is the opposite of the alien pulse of the Ultra Beasts. When an Ultra Beast invaded Alola, the first sign of trouble was often the behavior of the totem Pokémon. They became agitated, uneasy, sometimes even leaving their designated zones to confront the intruders directly. This was not simple territorial aggression. It was a biological reaction to an incompatible energy field. Imagine two ecosystems colliding. The air itself becomes charged. Totem Pokémon, attuned to the natural flow of Alola, could sense the Beast Boost aura as a corruption, a stain that needed to be cleansed. In the aftermath of the invasion, researchers documented cases where Pokémon would actively seek out remnants of ultra space energy left behind by the beasts. They would stand for hours near the site of a battle, their own aura flaring in response, as if trying to neutralize the lingering contamination. This interaction suggests that the Beast Boost aura is not just a passive trait, it is a weapon. It subtly warps the environment around the beast, making it more hospitable to the creature's own powers, while weakening its opponents. A totem Pokémon fighting an Ultra Beast was not just fighting a physical enemy, but an invisible field that drained its own strength and boosted the invader's every move. And that brings us to the terrifying potential of a beast that never stops growing stronger. The Beast Boost ability, as documented by the International Police, is a unique trait shared by all confirmed Ultra Beasts. Whenever an Ultra Beast defeats an opponent, its aura feeds on the energy released in that moment. The beast absorbs a portion of the defeated creature's life force, and with each absorption its own power increases. This is not a temporary boost. It is a permanent elevation of its base stats. A single Ultra Beast, if left unchecked in an ecosystem rich with prey, could theoretically grow infinitely more powerful over time. There is no known upper limit to this process. The Beast Boost aura is a self-reinforcing cycle of dominance. The stronger the beast becomes, the easier it is to defeat more opponents, which makes it even stronger. Consider what this means for the totem Pokémon. They are not merely guardians. They are the most powerful Pokémon in their respective territories, often acting as the final line of defense against invasive threats. But if an Ultra Beast were to defeat a totem Pokémon, the boost it would receive from that victory would be immense. Totem Pokémon are already many times stronger than wild Pokémon of the same species. Their defeat would fuel the Beast Boost aura to a catastrophic degree. In the chaos of the Pony Island convergence, it was only the intervention of the Tapu themselves and the prodigal strength of the player's team that prevented any totem Pokémon from falling in battle. But the threat was real. The Ether Foundation simulations showed that a single Ultra Beast, after absorbing the energy of just 2 totem Pokémon, would become strong enough to challenge a legendary. The aura is invisible, but it is always present. It radiates from every beast like heat from a dying star. And when that aura interacts with the natural protective energies of Alola, it creates a friction that can be measured, studied, and perhaps even weaponized. But the more we analyze this energy, the more we realize how little we truly understand. The Beast Boost aura is a bridge between dimensions, a constant reminder that ultra space is not a void. It is a living, breathing realm with its own rules, and those rules are bleeding into our world one beast at a time. As the last echoes of the Pony Island crisis faded, researchers turned their attention to a new question. If the aura of each Ultra Beast is unique, and if it interacts so profoundly with our dimension, then what happens when multiple auras overlap? What happens when the energy of one ultra space realm collides with another, not through an invasion, but through the very fabric of reality? The answers lie not in the creatures themselves, but in the universe they come from. A vast interconnected system of dimensions that might be more fragile than we ever imagined. And that system with all its hidden threads and parallel worlds, is waiting to be unraveled. The beast boost energy that surrounds every Ultra Beast is more than just a power source. It is a signature, a dimensional fingerprint that marks each creature as an outsider. And when that energy interacted with the totem Pokémon of Alola, something strange happened. Those totems, already amplified by the island's natural aura, began to resonate with the foreign frequencies of Ultra Space. It was as if the islands themselves were picking up a signal from somewhere far beyond. But what if that signal was not just one voice, but many? What if every time an Ultra Wormhole opened, it was not connecting to a single other dimension, but to an entire web of countless realities? This is where the multiverse theory enters the lore of Ultra Beasts, and it changes everything we thought we knew about Alola, about the games, about the very nature of the Pokémon world itself. Because the confirmation of infinite Alolas is not just a fan theory. It is a core narrative element that was quietly slipped into the fabric of the story during the events of Pokémon Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon. The games themselves tell us that there are multiple versions of Alola, each one a distinct strand in the vast tapestry of Ultra Space. And those strands are not separate. They are all connected, woven together by the wormholes that the beasts travel through. Think about what this means for the lore. The Alola you visited in your own game, the one where you battled Lusamine and caught Nebby, that is just one version of Alola. Somewhere in the Ultra Space web, there is another Alola where the invasion happened differently, where different people became followers, where different beasts emerged, and where the outcome was not the same. This is not speculation. The Ultra Recon Squad from Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon explicitly comes from a parallel Alola, one that was devastated by Necrozma's light theft. They are not from another world. They are from another Alola, a version of the same region that followed a different path. The confirmation is right there in the dialogue, in the architecture of the Ultra Megalopolis, in the way Lusamine's counterpart behaves. And if there are two Alolas, why not 1,000? Why not 1,000,000? Every player's game becomes its own strand in the Ultra Space web. Every time you start a new save file, you are creating a new timeline, a new reality, a new Alola, where you are the one who decides the fate of the islands. The Ultra Beasts, then, are not just interdimensional travelers. They are the threads that bind these countless Alolas together. They slip between the strands, moving from one version of reality to another, leaving traces of their beast boost energy wherever they go. That is why the totem Pokémon reacted. That is why the islands hummed with an unfamiliar resonance. They were sensing not just one beast, but the echoes of all the beasts across all the Alolas. Now let that sink in. The existential dread of knowing our world is just one of many targets. You, the player, your Alola, your Pokémon, your memories of the story, they are all unique, but they are also infinitesimally small in the grand scope of the multiverse. The Ultra Beasts do not see your world as special. They see it as one more door, one more opportunity. And when they come through that door, they do not care which Alola they find. They simply adapt, and they consume, and they move on. The idea that your entire adventure could be just a single node in an infinite network of similar adventures is both humbling and terrifying, because it means that no matter how many times you save Alola, there is always another Alola that fell. There is always a version where Lusamine succeeded. There is always a version where the Ultra Beasts won. The multiverse theory also explains why the Ultra Beasts are so difficult to classify. They are not bound by the laws of a single dimension. They exist in a state of quantum superposition, simultaneously touching every strand of the web. When you capture a Nihilego in your game, you are not capturing the only Nihilego. You are capturing one manifestation of a creature that exists across all realities. Its beast boost ability is not just a battle mechanic. It is a reflection of its ability to draw energy from every version of itself, from every Alola where it has ever landed. That is why its power grows when it defeats a Pokémon. It is not just absorbing the energy of that one opponent. It is tapping into the collective strength of countless echoes of that moment across the multiverse. And this brings us back to the totem Pokémon. When a totem's aura resonated with Beast Boost, it was not just a local phenomenon. That resonance was a ripple across the web. The totem in your Alola felt the presence of beasts from 100 other Alolas. It was overwhelmed not by one creature, but by the ghostly pressure of an entire species' dimensional footprint. That is why the Island Challenge felt so different when the Ultra Beasts appeared. The islands themselves were straining under the weight of infinite invasions. So where does this leave us? The lore of Ultra Beasts is not just a story about alien monsters. It is a story about the fragility of reality, about the thin membrane that separates one Alola from the next, and about the creatures that can tear that membrane apart. The confirmation of infinite Alolas means that every choice you make matters. But it also means that no single choice is absolute. There is always another strand, another path, another version of events, and the Ultra Beasts will always be there, moving between the threads, waiting for the next opening. What does that mean for the future of the Alola region? What does it mean for the legacy of the beasts themselves? The answer lies not in the games we have played, but in the spaces between them, in the echoes of the Ultra Deep Sea, in the silence of the Ultra Megalopolis, in the dark corners of the Ultra Space Web. The legacy of the beasts is still unfolding, and it is a legacy that will shape not just Alola, but every world that dares to open a wormhole. That story, the one that follows the threads into the unknown, is a story for another night. But trust me when I say, it is a story you will not want to miss. And so we arrive at the final reflection on the mystery of the Ultra Beasts, a mystery that has haunted the Pokémon world since the first wormhole tore open the sky above Alola. From the multiverse of infinite Alolas, each a unique strand of reality, we now step back and ask the question that has lurked beneath every chapter of this story. What are these beings truly? Not what the games tell us, not what the official records claim, but what the deeper lore whispers in the spaces between. Because the truth is, the Ultra Beasts remain the most misunderstood entities in the entire Pokémon mythos, and their legacy is not just a story of invasion and chaos, it is a warning. Consider the origin of the Ultra Beasts. They are not from another planet, another dimension, in the sci-fi sense that we might imagine. Ultra space is not a parallel Earth. It is a realm that exists alongside our own, but with entirely different physical laws. The Ultra Beasts are the native life forms of that realm. They did not evolve to be hostile. They evolved to survive in an environment where the very fabric of reality is unstable, where energy is scarce, where the only constant is the necessity to adapt. When they cross into our world, they are like deep-sea fish dragged to the surface. Their biology, their instincts, their very perception of reality is incompatible with ours. That incompatibility is the root of their destructiveness. It is not malice, it is a mismatch of existence. And yet we call them invaders. We call them threats. We build beast balls and create artificial weapons like Type, Null, because them as monsters. But consider the perspective of the Ultra Beast. To them our world is the hostile one. The air we breathe, the light we see, the gravity that holds us to the ground. These are all foreign, even poisonous, to a creature from ultra space. When Nihilego latches onto a host, it is not an act of evil. It is a survival mechanism. It is the only way it knows to interact with a world that is fundamentally alien to its own. This misunderstanding is at the heart of the legacy the Ultra Beasts leave behind. They force us to confront the limits of our own comprehension. Every time a researcher like Lucamine tried to capture and study them, they were not learning about the beasts. They were projecting human fears and desires onto something that cannot be contained by human logic. Lucamine's obsession, Mon's disappearance, the panic across Alola. All of this stems from a refusal to accept that there are things in existence that are not meant to be understood, that cannot be tamed. The warning the Ultra Beasts leave behind is one that echoes through every tale of cosmic horror. Do not reach into the dark, and if you do, be prepared for the dark to reach back. The Ultra Wormholes are not doors, they are wounds in reality. Every time we open one, whether through the power of a cosmog or the desperation of a grieving scientist, we invite a chaos that we are not equipped to handle. The beasts themselves are not the punishment, they are the consequence. They are the natural response of a dimension that we have violated. And so, as we close this chapter of our journey, we return to where we began, with the first 7 Ultra Beasts, the ones that stumbled into Alola. They are not the villains of this story. They are the messengers. They carry the scent of Ultra Space, the scent that lingers on the Falla, the scent that tells us that the boundaries between worlds are thinner than we think. They remind us that there are things beyond our sky that we will never fully comprehend, and that is not a failure, it is a truth. The legacy of the beasts is a legacy of humility. They teach us that not all mysteries are meant to be solved. Some are meant to be respected, some are meant to be left alone, and that is the darkest secret of all, the one we are most afraid to admit. We are not the masters of this universe, we are guests. And if we keep reaching into the dark, one day, the dark may decide to keep us. But that is a story for another night. For now, let the beasts fade back into the void where they belong. Let the wormholes close, and let us rest, knowing that we have glimpsed something vast and unknowable, and survived. If only for this moment, in the quiet of the night, when the stars seem just a little too close. Remember the Ultra Beast. They are still out there, and they are still watching. Sleep well. What did you think of this journey? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this changed your perspective or taught you something new, consider subscribing for more mind-expanding content. And if you know someone who would find this as fascinating as you did, share it with them. These are the kind of conversations that matter.